al quinto encuentro de egresados del programa de Lenguas Modernas, Inglés, Francés. Programa. Himno nacional. Segundo, himno de la Universidad del Cauca. Tercero, palabras del rector de la Universidad del Cauca, decano de la facultad y jefe del departamento. Ponencia central a cargo del doctor José Aldemar Álvarez, conceptos y principios de las pedagogías multimodales en la enseñanza de lenguas extranjeras. 10:30, taller, 12 del día, receso, 2 de la tarde, charla virtual a cargo del magíster Ferney Alberto Jiménez. 3 de la tarde, intervención musical. 4 de la tarde, presentación de la malla curricular a cargo de la coordinadora del programa, magíster Marisela López. 4:30, intercambio de experiencias. 6 de la tarde, intervención musical. Cierre del programa a cargo de la magíster Carmelina Encarnación Mosquera. Primero, himno nacional.
Ciencia, tus hijos hoy vienen a mullir de coronas tu altar, en ofrenda la dulce esperanza con que arrullas el arduo pensar. Alma, ciencia, tus hijos hoy vienen a mullir de coronas tu altar, en ofrenda la dulce esperanza con que arrullas el arduo pensar. Tú confieres invicta nobleza y ante el paria doblegas al rey. Solo un canon regula tus ritos, la desnuda verdad es tu ley. Tú confieres invicta nobleza y ante el paria doblegas al rey. Solo un canon regula tus ritos, la desnuda verdad es tu ley. Danos ya la vivífica norma que redima el humano dolor y congregue en la mesa del mundo al esclavo de ayer y al Señor. Danos ya la vivífica norma que redima el humano dolor y congregue en la mesa del mundo al esclavo de ayer y al Señor. Ciencia, tus hijos hoy vienen a mullir de coronas tu altar, en ofrenda la dulce esperanza con que arrullas el arduo pensar. Tú confieres invicta nobleza y ante el paria doblegas al rey. Solo un canon regula tus ritos, la desnuda verdad es tu ley.
Tercero, intervención de la Universidad del Cauca. El señor rector.
Buenos días para todos y para todas. Quiero inicialmente dar un saludo a las personas que me acompañan en la mesa, la doctora Patricia González, vicerectora académica, el doctor Alfonso Cuevas, decano de la Facultad de Ciencias Humanas y Sociales, a la magíster Anisa Barrabando, jefe del Departamento de Lengua. Bueno, para mí es un gusto estar aquí en la facultad, darle un saludo a este encuentro de egresados. Me encuentro muchas caras conocidas, dado que el programa de lenguas estuvo por mucho tiempo en la Facultad de Educación, de donde yo soy profesor. Quería leer unas palabras que he preparado para esta ocasión. Queridos egresados y egresadas, la Universidad del Cauca, en su apuesta por la esperanza y la consolidación de un proyecto universitario que convoca y motiva, basado en la confianza, el reconocimiento, la solidaridad, el fortalecimiento de las condiciones institucionales, reconoce la importancia de los egresados porque hacen parte de esta apuesta colectiva de seguir construyendo una universidad que soñamos, la Universidad del Bicentenario, que carga de sentido la acción individual en torno al proyecto colectivo de una común unidad que se reconoce en su multiplicidad, en su pluralidad y en su diversidad. El día de hoy, en este quinto encuentro de egresados de Lenguas Modernas con énfasis en Inglés y Francés de nuestra alma mater, quiero hacer mención del 28 de febrero de 1972 bajo el nombre de Filología e Idiomas, adscrito en ese entonces a la Facultad de Educación. En septiembre del mismo año, en coherencia con los componentes de lengua extranjera de los currículos de secundaria, se abrieron los programas español-inglés y español-francés, atendiendo a la necesidad de realizar un trabajo donde la lengua materna como lengua extranjera se reconocieran como elementos constitutivos de las mismas para estimular su adquisición y uso. Con el tiempo se realizaron una serie de reformas encaminadas a fortalecer el trabajo con las lenguas y su articulación con los componentes pedagógico, lingüístico y sociohumanístico, en el que para atender la demanda de las instituciones de educación media se creó la licenciatura en Lenguas Modernas, Inglés, Francés, bajo la administración en ese entonces de la Facultad de Educación. Por esa razón, tantos años allá en ese edificio. El licenciado en Lenguas Modernas desarrolla cualidades pedagógicas y competencias en lenguas extranjeras de modo que pueda desempeñarse satisfactoriamente como profesional de la educación y a su vez contribuir a solucionar problemas concretos relacionados con su práctica y su contexto social. El número de egresados está alrededor de 800 desde sus inicios. Además, este programa es reconocido por su calidad académica a nivel nacional, donde la Facultad de Ciencias Humanas y Sociales y el Departamento de Lenguas Extranjeras asumieron el compromiso emprendiendo acciones por una parte de capacitación docente, investigación disciplinaria y pedagógica sobre los conceptos fundamentales del programa y por otra abriendo el trabajo en las lenguas extranjeras a otros campos de acción además de la docencia, tales como el turismo, la traducción, el comercio, el lenguaje técnico, etc. En este último campo se creó la unidad de traducciones que coordina una de las actividades de extensión del Departamento de Lenguas a la comunidad. Hoy se denomina Unidad de Servicio en Lenguas Extranjeras, Unilingua, la cual atiende en promedio a 1.500 usuarios por semestre. En este sentido, desde el alma mater, reconocemos la importancia de nuestros egresados en esta conjunta construcción de una universidad presente en los territorios y sensible a las realidades y necesidades de su entorno local, regional y nacional. No podemos estar a espaldas a nuestra realidad social. Por eso reconocemos que los egresados siguen haciendo posicionando el nombre de la Universidad del Cauca a donde quiera que vayan, como lo han hecho muchos de ustedes, que debido a su gran sensibilidad han dejado en alto el nombre de nuestra universidad. Por ello, queremos que nos cuenten sus experiencias, que se sumen a nuestras estrategias por la universidad que soñamos. Es importante para nosotros que estén involucrados en nuestro quehacer institucional porque el alma mater se debe a ustedes y gran parte de su consolidación se basa en el desarrollo de su profesión. La Universidad del Cauca y la ciudad de Popayán seguirán siendo su casa y sus puertas permanecerán abiertas para ustedes y sus familias. Gracias por estar aquí y por supuesto por invitarme. Finalmente, los invitamos para que hagan parte de este proyecto rectoral que le apuesta a una universidad bicentenaria de excelencia y solidaria. Bienvenidos. Muchas gracias.
Palabras del decano de la Facultad de Ciencias Humanas, el doctor Alfonso Rafael Vuelvas Garay.
Bien. Muy buenos días para todas y todos. Muy complacido de estar aquí en este evento egresados del Programa de Lenguas Modernas. Muy complacido con escuchar las palabras de nuestro rector, a quien saludo, por el conocimiento, por ese rico recorrido que ha hecho de lo que es nuestro departamento y nuestro programa de lenguas. Efectivamente, ese programa que nació, estuvo en la Facultad de Educación y después de unos años, del año 98, hacemos parte de la Facultad de Ciencias Humanas y Sociales. Pero el vínculo ha estado allí, el vínculo sigue presente, nuestro trabajo pedagógico, nuestro trabajo como licenciados sigue vinculado pues a todo el accionar de la Facultad de Educación. Consideramos pues que estamos allí trabajando conjuntamente al lado de las licenciaturas que tiene la universidad, que no solamente está en la Facultad de Educación, también en la Facultad de Ciencias Humanas y también en la Facultad de Artes. De esa manera pues estamos cumpliendo una misión desde diversas facultades, y eso pues nos llena de mucha alegría, pero también nos costó un poquito de trabajo para avisarle al Ministerio de Educación Nacional que también otras facultades tenían licenciaturas, ¿no? Entonces, en los momentos de acreditación, en un primer momento estuvimos un poquito como por fuera del sistema, porque no nos tenía el Ministerio de Educación en su lista de programas, y allí perdimos algunos añitos, fundamentalmente con el programa de bilingüismo. 3 años, manifiesta la profesora Carmelina. Pero aquí estamos apostándole a muchas cosas, apostándole a la acreditación en ese momento. Fuimos de los primeros programas que tuvimos la acreditación en la universidad. En ese momento no se llamaba acreditación, se llamaba acreditación previa. Y nosotros nos inscribimos en ese proceso, lo lideramos en toda la universidad. En la facultad se atrevió Antropología, y luego nuestro programa que apostó por la acreditación previa, y ese proceso, mi querido rector, no ha concluido. Estamos ahorita en el otro proceso, estamos esperando respuestas del Ministerio de Educación Nacional en lo que tiene que ver con la acreditación del programa. Con eso quiero decir que las semillas que ustedes también como egresados han colocado siguen presentes, siguen enriqueciéndose, siguen vigentes, que el acompañamiento que tenemos en este momento desde la Vicerrectoría Académica, a quien encabeza de la doctora Aida, ¿sí?, a quien saludamos, nos complace su presencia, nos alegra su participación en ese programa rectoral de excelencia y solidaridad, porque estamos caminando también en la misma dirección. Nos alegra, nos complace muchísimo que usted nos acompañe en estos procesos desde el Departamento de Lenguas Extranjeras y sus programas. Tenemos el programa, nuestro programa insignia, que es el programa de lenguas, pero igualmente tenemos otros programas, como bien lo mencionaba nuestro rector, desde el departamento, el programa desde la unidad de servicios en lenguas extranjeras unilingua, desde el programa de formación en idiomas, y vinculados también a todos los ejes transversales de la universidad. Entonces, ustedes también han sembrado semillas para todos los procesos de intercambio. Han sido líderes en los procesos de internacionalización. Sé que muchos de ustedes aprovecharon esos momentos de internacionalización con los campamentos de verano. No sé a cuánto asciende hoy la cifra de estudiantes que han tenido la oportunidad de estar en los campamentos de verano, un ejercicio liderado desde el Departamento de Lenguas y que hoy vincula a toda la universidad, y eso pues también es una contribución de nuestro departamento y de nuestro programa. Quiero felicitar, quiero agradecer también a todos los egresados que han estado muy vinculados a todas nuestras actividades, con sus experiencias, con los testimonios, con los textos que tenemos, ¿sí? Allí está consignado ese trabajo. Allí seguiremos avanzando en la consolidación de todos los esfuerzos que hacemos por evidenciar, por poner de presente, por visibilizar las experiencias que cada uno de ustedes lleva a cabo en las instituciones donde desarrollan sus actividades. Quiero también agradecer a Ada, nuestra jefe de departamento, a Marisela López, la coordinadora, y a todos los profesores del Departamento de Lenguas por contribuir a que ese evento sea un evento que cada día se va posicionando en el círculo de actividades que desarrollamos siempre alrededor del cumpleaños de la universidad. Entonces, señor rector, señora vicerrectora, queremos también decirle pues que nos unimos, a pesar de que no es noviembre, pero hemos vinculado también esa programación con los 195 años de la universidad. Queremos seguir trabajando por este programa, queremos seguir trabajando por esa facultad y estamos inscritos en esa dimensión de una propuesta que pretende alcanzar los mejores niveles de excelencia. En esa ruta estamos caminando. Hemos venido caminando desde hace muchos años y nos complace muchísimo que ahora lo tengamos como un programa particular. Hemos venido caminando al lado de todo lo que tiene que ver con la fraternidad, que en el programa de ese quinquenio encuentra en el hecho de la solidaridad, encuentra su desarrollo. Nosotros hemos venido caminando en ello y nos complace mucho poder seguir caminando en esa dirección, porque hemos sido también pioneros con convenios, a través de acciones muy particulares, el trabajo que adelantamos en las diversas instituciones educativas de la ciudad, del departamento, con los programas de extensión y capacitación que hacemos con los egresados en esos encuentros donde muchos de nosotros hemos intervenido para llevar la voz de la universidad en un proceso de interacción, en un proceso de diálogo, en un proceso de permanente construcción. Como decano de la facultad, agradezco muchísimo su presencia. Sé que esa agenda de octubre y de noviembre es una agenda bastante apretada porque hay muchos eventos. Ayer tuvimos bastantes eventos y quiero aquí agradecer al doctor David René Hurtado por este evento que estamos llevando como evento de ciudad, Popayán Ciudad Libro. Usted alguna vez sembró la semilla. Ayer tuvimos el tope máximo en asistencia al evento y bueno, creo que algo de ese tope también se debe a la calidad de las intervenciones, a la capacidad de convocatoria que ha tenido ese evento. Entonces quisiera también invitarlos a que mañana, hoy están en nuestro evento de egresados, pero ustedes para que mañana o en algún ratico libre también se acerquen a Popayán Ciudad Libro, que el año entrante vengan con sus estudiantes, si ya no lo han hecho, como hemos visto, desfilar y asistir a grupos de profesores de la mano de sus estudiantes de las instituciones educativas donde trabajan. Es allí donde nos complacemos, donde vemos que ese esfuerzo, que es un esfuerzo que demora un año de preparación, ¿sí?, para unos pocos días, ¿sí?, unos 5 días, pero es un año de preparación. La recompensa es la asistencia, la participación. Entonces los invito también a que se vinculen mañana, a los que vinieron de otros espacios, que saquen unas horas de su tiempo para estar también en Popayán Ciudad Libro, que es el evento que vamos a posicionar como el evento más importante de la ciudad, por su trascendencia, por su gratuidad, por el significado que tiene para la ciudad, por las transformaciones que ofrece para la ciudad y por las transformaciones que ofrece en nuestro mundo espiritual. Queremos abandonar la violencia, queremos abandonar muchas cosas que nos han afectado y creo que ese es el camino que nos está dando este evento, que nos está insinuando, sugiriendo este evento con más de 5 años. Pero en este evento particular de hoy quiero agradecer a todas las personas que vienen, que intervendrán, a los ponentes, a los conferencistas, agradecerles de verdad en nombre de la facultad, agradecer a los profesores, agradecer al esfuerzo de todos los profesores por la realización de esta actividad y agradecer pues a la doctora Aida, al doctor René Hurtado, rector, a nuestra colega Dalgisa Parra por ese esfuerzo, por este apoyo, por esas palabras tan bonitas que nos han llegado a todos y que bueno, nos crean espacios de solidaridad y de fraternidad. Muchísimas gracias.
Palabras a cargo de la jefe del Departamento de Lenguas, doctora Adalgisa Parra.
Ahí me escuchan, sí. Buenos días a todas las personas presentes hoy. La doctora Aida Patricia González, vicerrectora académica, el señor rector, doctor René Hurtado, nuestro decano, doctor Alfonso Huelvas, a todos los profesores del Departamento de Lenguas. Tenemos aquí la presencia de colegas de la sede Santander de Quilichao, bienvenidos, qué alegría, egresados de nuestro programa y hoy docentes, a todos los estudiantes del programa y a todos los egresados. Para nosotros es una gran alegría contar con la presencia de ustedes hoy acá, de verdad que les agradecemos mucho que hayan atendido la invitación a este 5º encuentro de egresados, denominado Metodologías y tendencias en la enseñanza de las lenguas, desafíos en el siglo XXI. Al igual que el señor decano, yo quiero agradecer de verdad a la profesora Marisela López, la profesora Carmelina y a todos los integrantes del comité del evento, porque sin ellos no habría sido posible este encuentro. Soy testigo de todas las carreras, la gestión, pero bueno, aquí estamos, que eso es lo importante. Para nosotros es muy significativo que ustedes permanezcan en contacto con la Universidad del Cauca, nuestros egresados, y especialmente con el programa de la licenciatura, porque ustedes son ese puente que nos comunica, ¿cierto?, con la sociedad y con la escuela, y ese contacto nos permite conocer sus experiencias, inquietudes, expectativas y necesidades basadas en su práctica educativa. Sus aportes contribuyen a la retroalimentación del programa y a poder determinar la pertinencia de los contenidos académicos, las estrategias metodológicas, así como a reflexionar sobre el cumplimiento de nuestro compromiso misional de contribuir con el desarrollo social mediante la educación crítica, responsable y creativa. Esperamos que esta sea una jornada académica muy productiva, de un aprendizaje mutuo. De nuevo, muchas gracias por atender nuestra invitación y pues quedaría oficialmente iniciado el evento. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos finalmente la presencia también de la vicerrectora académica, doctora Aida Patricia González, el rector, el señor René Hurtado Herrera, el decano de la facultad, doctor Alfonso Rafael Huelvas, y la jefe del Departamento de Lenguas, Adalgisa Parra. Vamos a escuchar unas palabras de la funcionaria del área de egresados, la señora Mayra Cristina Ramos. Gracias.
Hola, muy buenos días a todos y todas. Buenos días a la mesa directiva. Les agradezco al programa de lenguas esta vinculación con el área de egresados, sobre todo a la profesora Marisela, con quien tuve contacto todos estos meses. Desde el área de egresados les extendemos un saludo. Es de nuestro agrado que ustedes estén aquí, que ustedes como egresados sepan que siguen siendo parte de la universidad, Ustedes ya forman parte desde otro punto de vista, desde el punto de vista profesional, el que nos ayuda a retroalimentar los programas, el que nos ayuda en temas de calidad, de autoevaluación. Entonces, como área de egresados, queremos extenderle esta invitación a que sigan siendo parte de nosotros, a que se vinculen con las actividades que tenemos. Hemos preparado una presentación aquí muy rápida de los servicios que ofrecemos, porque realmente nos hemos dedicado desde la administración del doctor Diago y ahorita en la administración del doctor Deibar, a acercarnos y a vincular a los egresados al alma mater. Entonces, bueno, extenderles la invitación a que nos conozcan. Estamos ubicados en la calle Quinta, número 470, y tenemos un correo que es egresados@unicauca.edu.co. Para contarles un poco de lo que estamos haciendo, tenemos aquí la carnetización. Si están interesados en carnetizarse como egresados de la Universidad del Cauca, pueden escribirnos un correo y ahí les informaremos todos los pasos que deben hacer para obtener su carnet de egresados. Tenemos también egresado destacado. Si alguno de los que está aquí presente quisiera ser parte de nuestra sección de egresado destacado, también puede enviarnos un correo y diciendo pues los méritos del por qué considera que debería ser parte de egresado, y nosotros pues nos comunicaremos con ustedes. También tenemos emprendedor destacado. Si también los presentes tienen algún tipo de emprendimiento, no importa que no sea ligado a la carrera, cualquier tipo de emprendimiento que ustedes también quieran hacer visible por nuestras redes sociales, entonces pueden también contactarnos a través del correo electrónico y nos ponen ahí egresado o emprendedor destacado para que sepamos a qué sección quieren pertenecer. También tenemos la revista de egresados. Si a ustedes les gusta escribir, esta revista se publica 2 veces por año, se publica a mitad de año y se publica pues la próxima edición, que será ya en el mes de diciembre. Tenemos el boletín informativo, ahí publicamos un poco de los eventos, publicamos las fotos que les tomamos aquí pues en este momento a ustedes, publicamos como todo lo que los programas han hecho, y el boletín sí es mensual, y también si ustedes quieren publicar en el boletín pues están invitados a hacerlo. Tenemos las capacitaciones. Ya sé que ustedes aquí pues todos son ya profesionales, ya tienen su trabajo, pero hemos dedicado una sección solo para los profesionales en inteligencia emocional y social, entendiendo pues que el día a día, el estrés nos consume independientemente de la carrera y de los títulos. Esto no conoce de eso. Entonces, desde el enfoque de la psicología organizacional, tenemos unas capacitaciones y asesorías en inteligencia emocional y social en el trabajo, destinadas a nuestros egresados para poder mejorar el clima laboral y poder hacer pues que tengamos convivencias y comunicaciones más sanas. Si también ustedes trabajan aquí dentro de la universidad y quieren solicitar alguna asesoría o capacitación grupal como para poder mejorar un poco el clima laboral, reducir el estrés y mejorar la resolución de conflictos, nos pueden contactar, y como les digo, todo lo hacemos desde el enfoque de la psicología organizacional. Esto es un poco de lo que hacemos. Realmente tenemos muchas actividades, nos pueden seguir en nuestras redes sociales, ahí publicamos todo. Seguramente hoy también publicaremos las fotos que hayamos tomado del evento, entonces ahí se van a poder también ver. Tenemos Facebook, nos encuentran como Egresados Unicauca, en Instagram como Egresados Unicauca, y tenemos también Twitter y pues YouTube. En este momento pues está transmitiendo gracias al Centro de Gestión de las Comunicaciones, se está transmitiendo este encuentro de egresados a través de YouTube de la Universidad del Cauca. Entonces, bueno, invitarlos, ya saben que contamos con capacitaciones, asesorías, tenemos capacitaciones en elaboración de hoja de vida, que a veces creemos que ya lo sabemos todo en elaboración de hoja de vida, pero bueno, también sirve para capacitar ustedes al personal que tengan o a sus estudiantes. Si ustedes como profesores quieren solicitarlo para sus estudiantes, trabajamos con estudiantes de último semestre. Ustedes nos contactan y nos dicen: tenemos un espacio de 2 horas tal día, y nosotros con ustedes acordamos para ir a ese salón y darles una asesoría o capacitación. Entonces, si lo quieren hacer con sus estudiantes, también estamos trabajando con estudiantes de últimos semestres. Entonces, ¿qué estamos dando en capacitaciones? Elaboración de hoja de vida, cómo se presenta una entrevista laboral, pruebas psicotécnicas, test de fortalezas y debilidades, identifiquen sus competencias laborales. Estamos trabajando en este momento con las 10 competencias más solicitadas en 2022, entendiendo pues que este tema es de actualización. Entonces estamos trabajando con las de este año, seguramente el próximo año pues estarán otras competencias laborales y estas competencias guiadas a las habilidades blandas. Entonces eso es lo que estamos haciendo en las capacitaciones. Y si ustedes pues están interesados, ya sea para su equipo de trabajo o sea para sus alumnos, sacar un espacio para que nosotros vayamos, entonces nos pueden escribir a egresados@unicauca.edu.co, nos dejan ahí todos sus datos y nosotros nos comunicamos con ustedes para acordar el día y la hora. Entonces, muchas gracias a todos. Recuerden que ustedes siguen siendo parte de la universidad y pues los esperamos en el área de egresados. Muchas gracias.
Agradecemos la presencia de la Unidad de Comunicaciones de la Universidad del Cauca, que estará con nosotros en la mañana transmitiendo. Les queremos recordar que durante este encuentro se va a tomar asistencia en la mañana y en la tarde para que por favor nos acompañen durante todo el día y al final ustedes podrán descargar su certificado de asistencia a los talleres. Cuarto, ponencia central, conceptos y principios de las pedagogías multimodales en la enseñanza de lenguas extranjeras. Es un placer para mí presentarles a nuestro primer ponente, el doctor José Aldemar Álvarez. Por favor, démosle un gran aplauso.
Okay, good morning for everyone. Well, it's a pleasure for me to introduce you to our first speaker, PhD José Aldemar Álvarez. He is a professor of applied linguistics at the School of Language Sciences at the Universidad del Valle, Colombia. He holds a master's degree and a PhD degree in a second language acquisition and teaching from the University of Arizona, United States. He also has a master's degree in Hispanic teaching, linguistic acquisition and teaching from the Institute Caro y Cuervo in Bogotá, Colombia. Also a master's degree in applied linguistics to the teaching of English as a foreign language from the District University Francisco José de Caldas in Bogotá, Colombia. And he is Bachelor in Modern Languages, Spanish, English from the Universidad Pedagógica Nacional in Bogotá, Colombia. He is currently the chair of emphasis in ELT education in the Interinstitutional Doctoral Program at Universidad del Valle. He has published in the areas of discourse analysis, critical discourse analysis, language policy, language teaching approaches, teacher education, intercultural communication, and multimodality. His latest publications include a co-edited book titled Critical Views on Teaching and Learning English Around the Globe, and recently in Teacher Education, Theoretical and Practical Considerations. He is the coordinator of the special interest group called Computer Assisted Language Learning, CMC, and Multimodal Pedagogies at ASOCOPI, the Colombian Association of Teachers of English. He is currently researching about the coloniality and the intersection of multimodal communication and intercultural communication, including nonverbal communication. Regarding his professional background, PhD Alvarez has worked as an English professor in different universities, such as the University of Arizona, University of Valle, La Salle University, National University of Colombia, National Pedagogical University, University of Santander, among other recognized universities. So this was all about the biodata of our speaker. And now he is going to hold a talk about the concepts and principles of multimodal pedagogies in the teaching of foreign language. So, Mr. Alvarez, welcome to this encounter. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Okay, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I wanted to start by expressing my gratitude to the program, particularly to Professor Marisela Lopez for this invitation. I'm very happy and thrilled to be here celebrating a long trajectory of this program. Congratulations. So first, so we have here teachers from schools, right? How many of you are teachers from schools and university? All right. Primary school. Okay, high school. All right. So teachers from institutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so okay, so initially they told me 1 hour, but it seems I'm gonna 1 hour and a half, but it seems since we are out of schedule, I'm gonna try to shrink a little bit the presentation, right? So today I wanna talk about multimodality and multimodal pedagogies. Have you heard of the concept multimodality? No? All right, cool. So let's see, today what I would like to do is to introduce you in this first part of the talk. I would like to introduce some of the concepts, and then on the second part, which is more like of a workshop, hands-on activities, we'll try to put that into practice, okay? So this is what I'd like to go over today, and I would like to, kind of like a disclaimer, what I'm going to talk about today, you already know it, and you already do it. What I'm going to do is to give you the names in terms of theory, because I know you're going to be saying, oh, I already do that, okay? So I'm just claiming it, right? You already do that, all right? So it's okay. Well, I'm just gonna provide you like a framework and maybe channel some of those things you already do. All right, so first of all, I'd like to start by going over this anecdote. So I'm gonna read it for you. So there's this meeting in Japan, right? And an American was discussing two alternative proposals with his colleagues, all of whom were native speakers of Japanese. So the American was, you know, he was very proficient in Japanese. It was called fluent. And so at this meeting, proposal A was contrasted to proposal B, and a consensus was reached about future action. And the meeting then was dismissed, right? And so upon leaving the room, the American commented, I think the group made a wise choice in accepting proposal A. But then the Japanese colleague says, but proposal B was the group's choice, right? So the American continued, but I heard people say that proposal A was better. And so the Japanese colleague says, you listen to the words, but not to the pauses between the words, right? Okay, is it like and? So what we have here, my question for this is, was there any misunderstanding here? Cultural misunderstanding? Yep. And well, you say, well, yeah, something was going on, you know. It wasn't linguistic. Was it linguistic? It wasn't, right? Because he was very fluent, right? So, and the situation was more on the nonverbal dimension, right? Things that are said through other modes, channels of communication that are not linguistic. And if you think, for example, of Asian cultures, silence is very important for communicating, right? And actually, Japanese people, they try not to say no. In that culture, saying no is kind of like not good. So they look for different ways to say. There's a book actually that says 17 ways of saying no in Japanese without saying no, right? Silence is one way of saying no, right? But the problem with this is that we have this idea that communicative competence is linguistic, right? But we see here that it didn't have to do with being competent at the linguistic level. And I guess you've heard all of these stories by your students possibly, or even yourselves, that many times they feel they are proficient in the language. They go abroad very, confident, and then they have a lot of miscommunication. And like, okay, I knew the grammar, I knew the vocab, but for some reason they didn't seem to understand me. And so I'm thinking, like, is it really because of the linguistic competence, or were you missing elements of cultural elements, like, for example, nonverbal elements of communication? All right, so I'm gonna move on. All right, so if these things move on, okay. All right, so this is working, okay, good. So the question that I'm asking is, how are we communicating nowadays, right? What does the communication landscape look like, and is second foreign language education informed by this new communication landscape? So I ask you, are we communicating the same as we used to communicate 10, 15 years ago? No, I don't think so, right? So much that many of you are holding the cell phone in your hands, and now you're thinking like, oh, I can feel my cell phone in my pants, all right? Or in my purse vibrating. It's like an extension of your body. It's like you miss it, right? So that's one way of communicating nowadays. We're connected to certain devices. So certainly the communication landscape has changed. Let me see where I am. There's like a delay with the pointer because it's not doing, or maybe I'm not pointing at the right place. Look, battery is not the problem. Right, okay. Better because I can move around. All right, so, good. So I'm going to mention a couple of elements that describe the communication landscape nowadays, right? So I'm gonna try again this. It does, all right, so yeah, good. So one of the features of the communication landscape nowadays is this, the turn to the visual, right? So, and look at Chris says this, a trend towards the visual representation of information, which was formerly solely coded in language. Now we have this, the mythic dominance of the screen has, replaced the dominance of the book, right? So we see screens everywhere. On the streets, you go to the doctor, you see screen. Waiting rooms, you see screens. You can even see screens on the back seats of the cars, right? So that's one of the elements. The other element is the multimodal turn, right? So contemporary technologies, right, are visual, one, but they also involve different modalities, right? We have moved from the dominance of language to the dominance of other modes of communication, not only language. And this is very important to us, which is a different view of communication. you remember the case, the anecdote, we have this idea that communication is, you know, you learn the vocabulary, you learn the grammar, and you're good to go. You already know how to communicate. But nowadays, because of the different modalities that we see in communication, so the idea of communication has expanded. So, and we call this verbocentrism, right? And this has been criticized. The idea that language, you know, is the most important, and that's the only channel of communication, and leaving away or leaving apart these other elements of communication: visual, spatial, gestural. And look at this one, the development of convergent technologies. So what happened? You know, a couple of decades ago, a lot of the things we do nowadays were separated. You know, we used to have a radio, we used to have a TV, you know, and we had different rituals associated to those devices. You know, back in my times, I remember sitting down with my family to watch the news, you know, the TV news at 7 p.m. every day, right? And then there was the soap opera, la novela. Uno si se la perdía para siempre, porque no la repetían, right? And so those rituals were, you know, like, this is the moment of the family. The radio, back in the days, people used to sit in front of the radio to listen to the news in a group as a family, right? Also remember the phone, you know, there used to be a phone in the living room, you know? And so, like, your mom would listen to everything you talk. And then there was even limitation, like, que no llamen tus amigos después de las 9, porque eso es irrespetuoso. So it's like a lot of the rituals, you know, with these devices imply different relations, right? Times, temporalities, and spaces. Nowadays, convergent technologies have taken away all of this. Because if you cannot watch the soap opera, you can see it 1 hour later streamed on YouTube, right? You can read the newspaper. You know, we used to read the newspaper like a certain time, but nowadays, like, you can read the newspaper, watch the soap opera, watch movies, call. You can do all of that in your room. You don't have to go to watch that with your family, right? So this is an interesting disruption of all of these rituals. So, and what has this caused? You know, the temporalization, the localization, and the personalization of many rituals. Because we don't depend on a person for certain things. We don't depend on certain, for example, institutions to do certain things. Think of the library. When I was a student, I remember I had to go to the library up until 6 when I was in high school because it was closed. So homework was up until 6. Nowadays, you will find kids doing homework at midnight because Google has it, right? So it also detemporalized and depersonalized because I don't need the librarian. I can do it on Google, right? So this is another feature of the new communication landscape. And this is another one, the multilingual and intercultural turn. And this has happened because of different transcultural and flows and globalization. For example, I know you here in the university and some of you have participated of the summer camps. And that is part of mobility, right? When I did my undergrad, going abroad was like, wow, like it is very difficult. And I remember we used to have a native speaker, and that was like like the access to that person was like, you have to make an appointment, you know, and she was always full booked, all right? And nowadays, you don't have to depend on that because you can have YouTube, you can find people online, you have Facebook. So the idea, we used to have an idea that, you know, English and the native speaker was the God, right? But that has been questioned if you look at this information. Native speakers 400 million, non-native speakers over 2 billion. The question is that back in the days, I was educated thinking that I was going to interact with a native speaker. Like, I was trained to think like whenever you interact, it's gonna be with a native speaker and it's gonna be spoken language. And nowadays, students interact with people who are not native speakers because there's 2 billion people speaking English. So even the chances of speaking with a native speaker is low than speaking with other people who are not native speakers. So this idea of I'm gonna teach you how to run the subway in New York or take the bus in London, is that really necessary nowadays? Right? That's not really the target nowadays, right? So, and this idea of verbal, right? But nowadays you see people having interactions online and it's not verbal. They use emoticons. With very limited English level, people have interactions with native or non-native speakers in English, right? So that's why I'm saying we need to expand this idea that we have to teach to speak, right? Really? Maybe they are not going to speak that much. Maybe they are going to start having some other interactions that are going to be very multimodal, using emoticons, using music, using short sentences, and a lot of the translator. And all of that counts as communication. You see, the idea that we have of communication as 2 people speaking in perfect English, you know, that's kind of like dated. So how are we doing? Is this argument kind of like sitting well, or you sound like, no, I don't get it? Yeah? All right, so, okay, this again, all right, so this is, you know, something that I wrote back in 2016, and I say English is a language that is dislocated from its traditional symbolic and geographic spaces and functions. And I say dislocated because teaching the student to, you know, you're going to go to Great Britain to take the bus and speak with a you know, very formal Brit. Maybe that's not like that, you know? Maybe we want to say you're going to take a bus in any part of the world and maybe you're going to need English, right? So maybe those spaces that we used to teach students to dream of, going to the Statue of Liberty and how you have to say this, maybe it's not going to be that place. Maybe it's going to be the statue of the tower, the Eiffel Tower. And you go and then you will see people speaking in English, right? You go to so many of these countries and then you want to practice. I remember I went and I was trying to practice a little bit of my French and they responded in English. I'm like, okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to not practice in my French. So what I'm saying is that all of these symbolic and geographic spaces, you know, that we dream of, they have been dislocated. So what I feel is that we have new ways of meaning, you know, of making meanings, of designing meanings, and disseminating meanings, and also interpreting meanings. Just look at WhatsApp, right? It's just one case of, you know, we have new ways of disseminating messages, right? And understanding those messages. Because when a person sends you like 2 words and 4 images of emoticons, you just interpret that in many ways, right? So I'm touching here on multimodal pedagogy. So what I'm saying is, okay, so we have like a communication landscape that has changed, right? We have sociocultural flows that are different. People nowadays have more opportunities of traveling, right? They mobilize more. And I'm saying mobility not only in terms of geographically moving to another part, I'm saying digital mobility. You know, we have students who say, I remember one student I had, like, I'm not Colombian, I am Latin American. So she already expanded her kind of like nationality. I would say continentality was what she was saying, because she said, like, I'm a Latin American. So now the people have, or they built all of these identities that are very hybrid, and they not necessarily need to travel to those places. You know, people like, they like, I mean, a couple of years ago, how many of you watched Korean soap operas? Nobody, you know, like, it was only Betty La Fea and all of those cafes. But nowadays, like, they watch Korean soap operas and Turkish soap operas. That is approaching us to other cultures, right? And so they say, like, they feel like, I like, you know, like the Korean culture. You see, it's not like, they are not only dreaming of the Anglo culture, they have access to other cultures. So we have a lot of mobility, and this is because the new communication landscape. So, and first of all, this concept is important in multimodal pedagogies. So when I say multimodal pedagogies, what we're trying to do is to bring in the classroom this, you know, this new communication landscape, right? How do we react to the ways our students communicate? They create meanings. And so this is multimodality, right? It's a perspective that sees communication as a result of the co-presence and codependency of different modes of communication that work together to make meaning. Right now, let's just analyze this instance of communication. So I am speaking here, right? I'm using spoken language, but I'm also using, you know, gesture and gaze. Hopefully, I'm not threatening, you know, I guess my gaze is friendly. I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I'm also communicating through the semiotics of my clothing, right? I'm not wearing shorts, because then I would lose all legitimacy. You're like, okay, so a presenter giving a talk in shorts, that's not credible. So I'm communicating credibility through the way I'm dressing, you know? And, but I'm also using this, look, a PowerPoint. It's part of this communication process right now. I'm using all of these modes, and if you analyze the PowerPoint, I'm using space, because you know this is the title, and it implies hierarchy, because it's on top and centered. I'm using colors, and they all red. Okay, you want to highlight that this is an important concept, and you also want to highlight this with blue. And I'm using an image here on your right, okay? So all of this is a semiotic assemblage, right? It's an ensemble. All of these elements are helping me create this particular meaning, this particular message. That's why we're saying communication is multimodal. There's no monomodal communication. When you talk, you are always communicating with the way you look, with your intonation, right? And so on. Even when you talk on the phone, you move your hands, right? And people can perceive the tonality, all right, or of your message. So what are multimodal pedagogies? So first of all, we're using the concept pedagogies because it's not one, it's multiple, all right? This is not like a recipe. That's why it's like principles, you know? And you, depending on several factors, you build the idea of a multimodal pedagogy, but it's your own pedagogy. There's no one. So we say they refer to curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment practices. We focus on mode as a defining feature of instructional organization and text design in learning environments. And I want to go back to this. These you see here are what some authors call the modes. You know, the visual mode, the oral mode, gestural mode, spatial mode, and linguistic mode, which I am using, I'm drawing on these modes right now as I, develop this talk and construct different meanings. So multimodal pedagogies, they say, okay, why don't you plan your classes around the concept of modes? And here is the origin of this proposal. Okay, so I have to say that multimodal pedagogies, although these are teachers of English, right? The proposal is, it's originated in South Africa, and in the context of post-apartheid. So it has a very strong social component. And they say we want to promote social justice and democratic values. How? By broadening the representations, the forms of representations that students have. Now, to go expanding a little bit on this. The situation is that because we have in education, we have this idea that the meanings are constructed, basically from the linguistic perspective, right? It seems like we limit our students to that, Just give you one example. I'll show you later, but just one example that I have that I always give. Usually in our classes, we say, the first day of class, we tell our students, introduce yourself, right? And so we have them stand up and say, okay, tell me about you. And so the student says, oh, okay, my name is, and they say all of that, right? So, because we are thinking like it has to be linguistic, right? In some of my classes, what I ask my students is, okay, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, right? Yourself, separated, by creating a multimodal text. And next week, you bring it. And so, I'll show you later some of those texts, but some students do coplas, poems, games, posters, PowerPoints, songs, videos, and all of those things. And then by the end, I know a little bit of yourself, right? Because they use other modes to represent their identities, who they are. And so what I'm doing is expanding the forms of representation. Not only saying like it's just limited to the, verbal production, but there are many other modes of producing meaning that you can use. Don't only think that meaning is constructed linguistically. Use other modes. So what they propose is, in our classes, why don't we expand forms of representation? And it's richer, the communication. The linguistic element is there. Okay, so all right, so this is another element of multimodal pedagogies, which I actually love very much. And this has to do with the critical element. All right, so how many of you have indigenous students in your classes? Right, you got many, right? Afro-descendant students in your classes, right? Farmers or family or sons of farmers, right? So what we see is that in human interactions, the different identities we have different exchange values. I want to see if I can explain this well, right? So the different dimensions of identity of people have different exchange values. For example, what has more exchange value? An indigenous language or Spanish? Spanish, right? Because it's the dominant language, the colonial language, right? In your class, what has more exchange value in your class, English or Spanish? It depends, because many times you say, no hablen español aquí, está prohibido, ponen dulce o pagan plata. So when you do that, you're saying like English has more exchange value than Spanish, right? Racially, you can also make the same question. What has more exchange value, indigenous ethnicity or mestizo? Mestizo que se cree europeo. All right, so you say, oh, mestizo, you know, because this is the dominant culture. So, and I'm gonna read this, right? Because all of these identities we have are resources, semiotic resources, right? And you're saying, okay, ya se complicó porque metió la palabra semiotics. What is semiotics? Semiotics has to do with the processes of making meaning, right? Semiosis quiere decir procesos de construcción de significado, right? When I say semiotic resources, it means los recursos o herramientas que utilizamos para crear significado. For example, right now, my voice is a semiotic resource, right? Everything we use to make meanings is a semiotic resource. Now, look at this. Taking the resources we have, which are taken for granted and invisible to a new context of situation and community to produce new meanings. Through this rearticulation in a new site, we come to see what we have in a different way. The source is resourced. If a student has an indigenous identity and we validate that identity in our classes or a language, an indigenous language, that is his resource. But when we validate it in our classes, we are resourcing, repotentializing that resource. Does it make any sense, people? Right? So, you know, like this is when someone, eso es como cuando escuchan la canción en la emisora. Uno se siente todo contento porque le ponen la canción que uno quería escuchar. Como que, I don't know, como que I'm being recognized. Right? Just imagine the same when you say, okay, en inglés decimos así. ¿Cómo se dice en NASA? Yes? To indigenous students. ¿Cómo se dice en NASA? Explícanos cómo se dice, qué quiere decir en NASA. When you use the word casa, por ejemplo, we say house. How do you say it in NASA? So that very act is a way of resourcing resources, the identity resource of that student. So, in this sense, then resourcing resources is a transformative activity that helps us come to new understandings about who we are, what we feel, and what we know. It's a cognitive, affective, and social activity that helps us discover our humanity. And you know, I'm telling you this because in the context of South Africa, they were doing, the students were learning English, right? And they had many indigenous languages in Africa, right? And so what these teachers did was, okay, we're gonna talk about the family, right? And so they said, why don't you do something for the class that you guys have in your families? And I don't know if you know, but in Africa, and especially in that part of Soweto, they had like dolls, unas muñecas que son tradicionales de ellos y que las hacen con papel reciclable y todo lo que encuentran en la basura. Y los niños, con sus limitaciones, llevaron las muñecas a la clase. Y para eso, ese acto cambió toda la dinámica de la clase de inglés en ese colegio. Y fue porque ese recurso semiótico de los niños, que era expresar la identidad del grupo a través de esas muñecas, hizo que se revitalizara la clase y cambiaran la actitud sobre el aprendizaje de las lenguas. And that's what they call resourcing resources. How many resources, do we know the resources of our students, for example? If we know the semiotic resources of our students, maybe there's chances that we can resource those resources. I'll talk more about this later. So so this is a concept of semiotic resources. What are they? They are the basic units of meaning making. Everything you use to make meaning is a semiotic resource. Your voice, right? Si le tira la chancla al hijo porque no hizo caso, that's a semiotic resource. because he's telling him, I'm really angry, right? Yeah, so we give meaning, and we make those meanings as we interact. All right? Esa chancla ya no es un objeto que uno usa en los pies, ya es a flying object to punish. All right? So, but also think of this. The ideas, the beliefs we have are semiotic resources. The ways you think about, God, women, education, all of those are semiotic resources. Why? Because you deploy them to create meanings. Right? Those are also semiotic resources. So our brains are basically a repertoire of semiotic resources. And we acquire those semiotic resources through processes of socialization. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The other concept is design, and let me check on the time because I know you want to go for a break. What time is it? 20 to 10. All right, I still got 20 minutes. Okay, good. So the other concept is design. So design has to do with meaning making. So things that I would like you to take away today. For me, everything comes down to meanings. Just think of this. Everything in your lives is about meanings. The meaning of, for example, today this was supposed to start at 8, but we didn't start at 8. So the meaning of arriving at that time, right? For you, so many of you are already tired. Like, when is this going to end? You are attaching meanings to this event, right? Everything we do is about meanings. And those meanings are a repertoire we have, but they are all the time, being tested, negotiated. All of that is process of meaning making. And so meaning making is about choosing and assembling resources. I was thinking about this talk, and when I was thinking about this talk, I was basically designing. When you plan your classes, you're designing a pedagogical activity, which is a big macro meaning, right? What are the meanings I want my students to go out today? I want them to go out thinking that I learned el simple present, or I want them to go out saying like, oh, aprendí cómo hablar de la rutina. A structural perspective versus a functional perspective, yes? So what meanings do you want your students to go out thinking that they acquired in one day? So, but assembling those resources have to do with this. Individual desire, also capability, ideological position, as well as perceptions of audience and context. This is at the beginning when they told me, you're going to give a talk, I immediately said, who is the audience? Right? And they told me, egresados. And I started thinking, okay, egresados. And now, I haven't thought of age. But then when I came and I started seeing you, okay, all right, we don't have like egresados de hace un año. La mayoría son como de hace 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 más años, right? I don't want to keep counting. I don't want to keep counting. And look, by the way, congratulations. I really appreciate people who have been egresados for more than 20 or 15 years. Que estén aquí todavía diciendo quiero aprender cosas o quiero a ver qué me dice ese loco, de pronto me dice algo que me interesa. That's really, really nice, right? Look, the new graduates are not here. They are struggling with discipline and all of these things at schools. I know. You guys already know that. You already solved that problem. Okay. So everything is about design, Everything is about design. You're going to ask for permission, you design the message, right? Or even as you're doing it, you're designing the meanings in your mind. And so this is the other concept that's really central in multimodal pedagogies, transmodality. And Look, this definition is really complicated, but this is something you do all the time. Is movement of ideas across modes and amplification or mutation of meanings derived from different affordances. Okay, yes, that's really complicated, but I'm going to tell you this one. So, you tell your student, typical, right? You tell your student, okay, we're going to read this story, and I want you to draw a picture of the story. You do that, right? That's typical, right? So, and then, when the student sits down to draw a story, to draw a picture of the story, they're like, I don't know how the main character looks like. Because books don't tell you exactly. You have to imagine a lot of that, right? So the student says like, okay, I think he's white, right? And I think he's long-haired. And the student starts doing that. So that's transmodality, going from one mode, which is written, to another one, which is visual. But the process of going to another mode generates this, amplification. Because now you tell your student, hey, how did you draw the main character? And I'm like, okay, I think he's like this. He's long-haired, he's got green eyes, is he tall, is he short, is he chubby? And then the student has to do a lot of language work, right? That's amplification, and many times mutation. It generates other meanings, right? So we do this all the time. When you say, okay, I want you to do a mind map, right? Mind has to work in a different way when they read, and then they have to do a mind map. That's transmodalization. And it generates lots of different nice processes in people's minds. So what is a typical transmodal sequence that you guys do? So take 1 minute and tell the other person typical transmodal sequences. You ask your students to draw, to create videos. 1 minute, tell the person next to you. So guys, they are informing me that I can go up until 10:30. Oh my gosh. They are telling me that I can move, extend a little bit, and then we go for a break, and they have refrigerio. Creo que es lasaña y qué más. I'm kidding. Okay, so, all right, so what are typical transmodal sequences over here? You can use Spanish if you feel like I'm threatening with the English. You say, okay, I can use Spanish. We're bilingual. ¿Qué secuencia transmodal utilizan ustedes? Which one? She's saying paintings and writing sentences. Like, that's a nice one. The teacher is saying that she has them do like paintings or drawings, and then like labels with sentences, you know, informing the image, which is, you know, different modes, you know, writing and also image. What about here, teacher?
Storytelling, for example. Yeah, it's used on images, so we allow students to create a story about what they are seeing.
Great. Creating stories about what they are watching. Okay.
We ask our students to act. For example, you show a word and you can work that with verbs and adjectives, and they act, and the others are going to guess the word.
Beautiful. This one is also nice, and we do it a lot, you know, having students act out. When you say, okay, act out this dialogue, that's transmodalization, because it's written on paper usually, the dialogue, and then we say act it out, right? So you see, what I told you at the beginning, you do multimodality all the time, right? You do multimodality all the time. Okay, so let's keep going here. Now, principles of multimodal pedagogies. What you're seeing on screen, these are my kids' works. Let's see if this works. Do we have sound? ¿Podemos poner sonido? ¿Podemos conectar el sonido? Okay, something happened. All right, so I'm gonna skip this. All right, so I was gonna show you a little clip of my son, but I don't know, it just didn't work. So look, this is my son. His name is Nathan, and all of these are projects that he engaged himself to do, right? He did this thing, he did this. This is like a painting he did. And this is a book he built one day. He said, like, I'm gonna do a book. And it was interesting because here we see, let's see if I can make it bigger. So it's interesting because if you can see here, it says the destruction, and he has here by Nathan, right? So, and it's a book, right? He drew different things and wrote things. And here is one drawing, and here he has another drawing, and this is all written in English. Of course, he's growing up with me, and I'm, teaching him English, kind of. I speak with him, that's all. And so he writes here, and I was surprised that he has very clear the idea of a book, like authored, and he also stapled the book here, like he bound it, right? So. And I can read very clearly here. And look at this. I wish for the God to bring to life. Now, what's interesting, guys, is that when I look at he's going to school, right? He's going to a bilingual school. And in school, they are teaching him simple present, right? When I see his writings, he is like interconditional. I don't know how he feels, because obviously he has developed language by watching TV. And, just the contact, listening to music, and with me, I speak to him in English. But he produces this language which is very, very advanced, and then he goes to school to study simple present. Yes? And so he's done all of these things. And when I look at him, he's all the time learning, by being multimodal. And then when I look at this and I think of this, I say, and I look at all of the activities that they give him at school, and also my daughter. I have a daughter, she's 16, and she also has a lot of projects at school. And all of those projects are multimodal, and they do a lot of things. And then I'm thinking, why are schools very multimodal, but then when we go to university, everything becomes verbocentric? It's like we forget that we learn by doing, by playing, by dancing, by drawing, by all of these things. It's interesting, right? And then we educate our students to be teachers in this very formal way. And then they go to schools. And in schools, they should have to go back to teaching again multimodally. Yeah, that's kind of like a disconnection, right? So, and this is the first principle of multimodal pedagogies. Language learning is an embodied experience. What do you mean by embodied? When you speak, you move your body. And it's not like you're only communicating through because the idea is that language is here and here, right? Language is here and here. That's the idea that we have been sold. But when you speak, you move your hands and your head, it means that message is coming out with your body as well. You know what I mean? When you say I'm sad, It's not your mouth, it's your body who is sad, right? So language is embodied. And look at this. The act of learning is experienced physically, linguistically, emotionally, and artistically. Those are the dimensions of learning. Maybe the problem is that we reduce it to linguistically. And so that's why in multimodal pedagogies we always think like, oh, if you're engaged, not only linguistically, but artistically, emotionally, right? Maybe the learning is gonna be more meaningful. So that's the first one. Learning is a multidimensional act, it's a multimodal experience. So multimodal pedagogies also imply a move from from language to communication or meaning making. I always ask this question: what is it that we teach? Do we teach language or do we teach communication? Because if you ask your students, they say, oh, no, yo como que quiero es comunicarme con los gringos, right? No le dice, es que yo quiero saber todos los detalles de la gramática, como que quiero saber el pluscuamperfecto en inglés. Nobody's gonna tell you that. Students want to be able to communicate with members of the other group, to watch movies, to listen to music, to get a girlfriend and be able to speak in English to her, or a boyfriend. To understand them, right? So then I always think that when I'm teaching languages, I'm always teaching, meanings that will help them communicate with the other group. And those meanings are not only linguistic, they are cultural, they are nonverbal, yes? So, but it's really hard to say because, it's like removing all of the labels. We say, Inglés 1, Inglés 2, the language we use is always language, yes? What do you teach? English language. You don't say, I teach English communication or something like that, where we say language. This is why we call that verbocentrism, the idea that language is the center of everything, but the linguistic element. The other is what we have been saying, written and speech are modes of communication. They are important, but they are not the only modes. Remember what we said at the beginning with the anecdote? Knowing the grammar and the vocabulary is not enough. There are elements of communication that are beyond that. And remember, nowadays we don't only build speech as text, we also build many other texts. And again, I go back to the communication landscape. And this is another argument that I gave. We are teaching supposedly English, right? But at the end of the day, we want our students to be able to interpret and make meanings of different texts. And when I say different texts, is that if they see a billboard, a poster, a message on the internet, they watch a movie, they listen to music, they are able to make meanings out of those texts. And those texts are not only linguistic, they are visual, they are multimodal, right? So that's why I say we gotta go beyond that, because nowadays they build different texts, not only spoken. This one sounds kind of like difficult, but it's not. Meaning making is chronotopically situated. You know this. Chronos means time, right? And topos means place, right? Topography, topos, right? So those meanings are bound to time and space, but they are also informed by spatio-temporal resonances of the individual and the community. This is just to say that the meanings we create, they are always situated. it doesn't make a lot of sense when you have a student repeat a dialogue and repeat the dialogue, because it's not situated for him or her, right? It doesn't relate. Maybe, I'm not saying don't use dialogues, because dialogues are models, right? But maybe, why not, okay, use dialogue, but why don't you try to recreate this dialogue on the basis of who you are, yes? Because you give it a chrono and a topo to the dialogue and the characters. Oh, this one is hard because I think the table is going to block the view, no? Okay, so 5. Meaning making is ongoing and happens across modes. We're always making meanings. We're all the time making meanings. Even when you sleep, your brain is busy making meanings. Now, if you don't remember, that's different, because people don't remember they dream. But the brain is always busy making meanings. Even if it is repeated, right? Meanings are always revealed, right? So, and it happens across different modes, right? You say good morning, right? In the morning, you say good morning, but that good morning could vary a lot, because I can say morning, but I don't look at the person. And then the other person doesn't feel acknowledged, right? So you're by not using gaze, you're communicating something to that person, right? Even though you say good morning, but the persons are like, you are distant today, right? So, and sometimes we don't say these things, but our bodies interpret all the time, make the meanings and interpret. And then you feel like, it's weird, something's going on, right? You're not thinking in terms of an analyst, but you're saying like something's off in this interaction, right? So, because we communicate and it's always transmodal, you know, I didn't want to tell you, I'm angry with you, but by not acknowledging with my gaze, I'm telling you I'm angry with you. You know what I mean? We use other modes to communicate, not only the linguistic in that case. Next. All right, this is another one that's gonna check a little bit your views. All right, so for me, learning is an appropriation. All right, so I'm gonna give you an example. You tell the student, okay, repeat with me, house, house, and the student says, house, house, house. All right, and even if you pronounce exactly, and the student can't even pronounce exactly like you, house, house, it's not the same house, right? It's not the same house. Yes. It's like, for example, they teach you horse, you know, and I remember when I was learning the word horse, I am from a town, my parents were farmers, and my dad always had horses. So I grew up riding horses, right? So when they say horse, and I learned the word, horse for me was all of that, right? It's not the same horse you will teach a kid, urban kid, who has only seen horses on TV. It's not the same horse, right? So what we do is that we always appropriate. Nobody can pass any knowledge to you directly. You're like, yeah, pero la matemática, 4 es 4 aquí. Yeah, are you sure? Is the same 4 for you? Because you teach 4 the kid utilizando frijoles, right? But is that the same 4 you're teaching that kid, right? That kid is always, many of them, when, you know, like, they get like, every time they think of 4, it's like, oh, frijoles 4, right? Frijoles 4. If you teach with the hand, they are like, oh, hands, right? Because we count in different ways. Think, for example, of Indians. Indians count very nicely. They say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We have divisions of 3 here in the fingers. Right? So they got 15 here. We only have 5. Right? So they relate to counting in a different way, and it's cultural. Right? So, number 1, for me, learning is an act of appropriation and the result of engagement. Engagement. So let's look at this concept. Appropriation refers to an individual's internally motivated adoption and adaptation of meanings and cultural practices for the development of subjectivity and self-expression. Individuals internally motivated adoption and adaptation. There is a part of adoption because the person wants to pronounce the word house in the same way, right? But he has or she has to adopt it, and also the meanings and the cultural practices. With what purpose? With the purpose of developing subjectivity. Porque es que si uno aprende la lengua, uno la aprende para uno. Es decir, uno la aprende para desarrollar su subjetividad, para poder expresarse. Como que uno no la aprende para otro. Por eso cuando uno tiene actividades que los estudiantes ponen de su vida, como la actividad que les dije al principio de personal presentation, hay un engagement grandísimo de ellos porque es que ellos pueden expresar su subjetividad. ¿Sí? Cuando el estudiante puede decir, a veces uno no sabe, y el estudiante le dice, no, yo soy gamer, yo soy activista, y todas estas cosas que uno nunca sabe porque le dice, tell me about you, my name is Maria, I'm 20, that's all. But when you have them to do a multimodal text, they give you more about their lives. And then they feel this. And people engage more when they talk about things they like, right? When they say, like, I'm showing myself to the world through another language. So that's appropriation. And then we have engagement. Engagement is an individual's cognitive, emotional, corporeal, moral, aesthetic involvement in meaning making. Why do students get bored repeating dialogues? Because the engagement is usually this one, linguistic and cognitive. Repeat the dialogue, right? They don't have usually this, emotional, corporeal, moral, aesthetic, because you say, in your seats, practice the dialogue, right? There's no emotion to that, you know? That's kind of like, you know? And so, aesthetic involvement. So, there's nothing, you know? But if students involve themselves cognitively, emotionally, corporeally, morally, because they have to make decisions, and aesthetically, because they have to build texts, possibly they're going to be more engaged, right? And that leads to learning or appropriation. Does it make sense? Yeah, kind of like, right? All right. By the end you say, okay, yeah, I don't think so, ciao. All right, 7. So I say, rather than users of language appropriation positions students as potential meaning makers. It's really hard to get rid of the idea of usar la lengua, right? But students should be more seen as meaning makers rather than language users. Because when you say language users, it's like language is an object that is just used instrumentally, but actually you appropriate it in very particular ways. And so you make meanings with it. Culture. Okay, so this is another concept in multimodal pedagogies. And look at how I define it. Culture is an open and dynamic repertoire of semiotic resources. Could be material, but it could be non-material. The culture is produced, embodied, enacted, and reshaped in interaction, and is appropriated in processes of socialization. So, all right, sorry, I'm gonna check my time. Okay, so, what happens when you're born, right? When you're born, immediately you start a process of socialization. First thing you're socialized into, language, right? You are taught the ways of speaking of the community. You don't have a say in this. Naciste en Medellín, pues paisa te tocó, antioqueño. En Popayán, payanés, patojo, okay, right? So you are immediately socializing to that particular feature, but at the same time you're socializing to many other things. The food, right? The food. Yo crecí comiendo arepa al desayuno, sancocho al almuerzo y frijoles en la tarde. Comida caldense, right? Y todavía sigo comiendo arepa todos los días en el desayuno. Excepto el tiempo que viví en Bogotá, que es puro pan y me enseñó a comer pan. So you're socializing to the ways of eating, the type of food, the cultural practices, the religious beliefs, all of that. You're socializing to all of that, little by little, at the household, and then when you go to school. And then all of the instances that happen, you know, always give this example. I went to the supermarket with my son. He was very little. He went to one of the shelves, grabbed a chocolate bar. He opened the chocolate bar and started eating. And stop it. Okay, so I said, all right, so look at this. Before you eat it, this is not like home, you gotta go there to that person and you gotta pay for that, right? You don't eat it until you pay. That is an act of socialization, right? Basically telling him, look, there is an exchange, you know, and then you have to pay for objects in this particular place. That's socialization. You go to church and like, recuérdate, no cruces las piernas, no, todo lo que le dicen uno cuando va a la iglesia, que no haga tal cosa, no se duerma, etc. Those are forms of socialization. So we are socializing to everything. And all of those things we're socializing to become, remember I said, semiotic resources, because we use them to make meanings, right? And what is fun is that we belong to different groups of cultures, because you're a man, so you're socializing to the ways of being a man, right? Azul, carros, no llore, right? You're a woman, okay? Falditas, rosadito, muñequitas, all right? So you're socializing to those ways of that the culture, you know, has historically constructed as ways of being of a woman, of a man, or a man. So, but at the same time, you make part of another big group, which is, for example, those who believe are Catholic, right? But at the same time, you belong to the bigger group, which is being patojo, right? And another, you could Vallecaucano or Caucano, and then Colombian. So you belong to different groups. And even if you're married, you belong to a different group, right? Because when you're married, your topic changes. The kids, you know, tengo que llevar mis niños. Ya no es que hizo el fin de semana en la discoteca. Ya es, no, I was taking care of the kids, helping homework, right? And as you grow old, you belong as another group. Now you're talking about pills. La pastilla para tal cosa, la cita al médico, right? So you belong to different groups, and those groups have different cultural practices, right? They have cultural practices. And so all of those practices that we built is a repertoire, right, of semiotic resources. Fun thing is that those semiotic resources can be shaped, you know? They can be shaped in interaction. When I was adolescent, I was born in a small town, you know, very conservative in a very Catholic family. And so obviously they wanted me to look like a straight man, short-haired, right? And once I decided to let my hair grow, right? So the tradition, the cultural practices of my family, but also the town, porque en el pueblo el que es marihuanero es el que tiene el pelo largo y tiene un piercing, right? That's the culture of a town. So I started doing that, and then I was testing and I was contesting the cultural practices of how a man should look. So even though culture is sedimented through history, that's why it's accepted as cultural, because it's sedimented as accepted for the group, by the group. The group and the individuals have the opportunity to contest, to challenge, right? And that's how new cultural patterns emerge. That's why I say it's dynamic, right? And it's not only material, her long hair, but it's symbolic, what it means. And nowadays, it's pretty common to see men with long hair, earrings, and all of these things, right? Now it's very common. So it means the cultural practices have been reshaped, right? So most interpersonal interactions imply intercultural negotiation. And so again, culture, they're taking pictures. Okay, culture, if we say we belong to different cultural groups, right? It means that when we meet with another cultural group, there is an intercultural interaction. Interculturality is not only about interacting with people from other countries. That's kind of like a very, very limited view. You know, like, oh, interculturality because you're talking to an American or a French. No. In my view, at the micro level, when you interact with a woman, that's an intercultural interaction, because women have different cultural patterns. I always give this example. How many times have you seen groups of men go into the bathroom? I haven't seen that, you know? That's women's stuff. Cultural practices of women. Why do they do that? They want to feel safe. I don't know. They want to exchange makeup. I don't know. Whatever that is just cultural practices of women, right? So there's many things that have to be negotiated at the interactional level, and that's because we belong to two different cultural groups. Sometimes cultural groups closer, some other times farther. You know, Caldenses, Antioqueños, kind of like cultural groups, you know, regional cultural groups, closer. But Caldense, Costeño, the distance is wider, right? So possibly more intercultural negotiation. So, oh, look it. Man, my English, I'm telling you. All right, so this is what I'm saying. You know, we belong to different identity affiliations: linguistic, national, racial, ethnic, political, gender-based, age-related, physical, socioeconomic. And what we do is to negotiate our repertoires of semiotic resources. That's it. All we have is repertoires of semiotic resources. When we meet with another group, that's what we bring to the table. The other group comes up with something and okay, we have to negotiate. I don't understand, or maybe there is conflict, and then you start to, if you are interculturally aware, you say, okay, I know why this is happening, because in your group, maybe you think this happens in this way, you know, and then you start negotiating. And then we have 10, multimodal pedagogies are transformative, right? So remember that what I'm talking about here is, these are principles of multimodal pedagogies, right? And they are transformative. Remember what I said about resourcing resources, right? So, you know, the fair thing is that I have a repertoire of semiotic resources, right? And I value my semiotic resources. I value, I don't know, being Caldense, speaking Spanish, all of these things. Maybe I value being a man. And then I got into an interaction. So my semiotic resources in front of the other person or interlocutor, I don't want my semiotic resources to be at a lower exchange value. You know what I mean? I want them to be equal, right? And it's the same. If you're a woman and then you're in front of a man negotiating whatever interaction, you don't want your semiotic resources, being a woman, being a mom, you know, being a teacher, you don't want those semiotic resources of yours to be less than the other person in front of you. So in multimodal pedagogy, what we want to say is, in our classroom, which is our space, why don't we try to make the semiotic resources of people have an equal, you know, value, right? Do we do that, right? In terms of ethnicity, languages, races, knowledges, and so on. So we know that language classroom is a locus of intercultural struggle, negotiation, construction of student subjectivities and identities. So we acknowledge diverse forms of inequality, and we strive to resource students' semiotic resources, right? We want to strengthen those resources, right? Don't feel less because you come from a farming family. It's great. 70% of the food we eat in the urban centers come from farms. Los campesinos nos alimentan a nosotros, 70%. Entonces los hijos que llegan como apenados porque soy hijo de un campesino, nosotros decíamos, debe ser muy orgulloso porque ustedes producen la comida que nosotros comemos en las ciudades. Right? That's a way of resourcing students' students' identities. So I'm going to check on the time. It's 10:20. Why don't we stop for now and have, you say 10:30, right? And have 10:30 for a break. And we're going to have, 15? Okay, so we don't, better stop here and we give more break. Yes, from now until 45? Okay, desde ahora hasta las 10:45? ¿Sí? Ok, entonces, paremos aquí. Igual ahorita vamos a seguir en la parte de taller. No alcancé a terminar esta parte, pero creo que con los principios ahí me siento satisfecho. Gracias por estar, aguantar. Vamos a ver si recargamos con las 11 y volvemos. Gracias.
Somos un proyecto educativo fundamental para la historia,
el presente y el futuro de Colombia.
Somos alumnos, investigadores, docentes, administrativos y egresados.
Desarrollamos ciencia, tecnología e innovación.
Compartimos el arte y la cultura.
Posteris lumen, moriturus edat. Quien ha de morir, deje su luz a la posteridad. La Universidad del Cauca, fundada en el año 1827 por iniciativa de los libertadores Simón Bolívar y Francisco de Paula Santander, es el punto de partida y el destino que se proyecta como una realidad dinámica de la vida de la ciudad y de la región. Para confirmar nuestro liderazgo, venimos trabajando en los procesos de acreditación institucional porque entendemos que uno de los grandes desafíos que enfrentamos es la calidad de la educación para la sociedad colombiana. Debemos diferenciarnos en el contexto educativo por la capacidad de ser pioneros en el desarrollo académico del país.
La búsqueda de la certificación de la calidad en los procesos administrativos y de la acreditación institucional de alta calidad ha determinado la gestión institucional de los últimos años, asumiendo los retos que el siglo XXI nos impone.
Con rostro humano.
Con rostro humano.
La Universidad del Cauca, con programas académicos desde tecnologías hasta postdoctorados, contando también con sus grupos de investigación registrados en el sistema de investigaciones y los reconocidos por Colciencias, proyectan su labor académica e investigativa a la sociedad desde sus sedes en Popayán y Santander de Quilichao, en el norte del departamento del Cauca.
La investigación es una fortaleza de nuestra institución. La evolución de los procesos investigativos ha permitido una mayor interacción entre el Estado, la sociedad y el sector productivo, sobre la base de la apropiación y el desarrollo del conocimiento científico y tecnológico.
La Ciudad Blanca y su región nos permiten emprender un proyecto universitario en donde los estudiantes son la razón de ser, reconocen el presente y proyectan con inteligencia los retos del futuro. Jóvenes competentes se enfrentan a las realidades locales y globales, encuentran en la diversidad un gran potencial y asumen con excelencia y conocimientos caminos para construir sociedad. En el alma mater se forman líderes éticos y solidarios.
Somos los nuevos líderes que promovemos el progreso para todo el país, porque el futuro es hoy.
La Universidad del Cauca es una institución en donde la calidad es un compromiso diario, un lugar para aprender, para pensar y aportar soluciones prácticas e innovadoras, para conocer cómo ocupar el mundo y conservarlo, un lugar para desarrollar la capacidad de análisis, interpretar la música y aplicar la ciencia y la investigación.
La cultura y el bienestar son el eje transversal de la dinámica institucional, a través del desarrollo de programas, proyectos, planes y actividades orientadas a mejorar el ambiente universitario.
Con rostro humano.
Con rostro humano.
Con rostro humano.
Defender nuestros derechos, dándole vida a las palabras y a las ideas, para construir ciudadanía a partir de los argumentos. Nuestra institución, como proyecto universitario, ha contribuido a la formación de la identidad del Estado. Ahora el reto es contribuir desde sus dimensiones, para que se fortalezca la institucionalidad democrática en el escenario del posconflicto.
Nos preparamos para asumir los nuevos desafíos del conocimiento. Con la participación de estudiantes, docentes, administrativos, egresados y sociedad en general, se contribuirá desde sus liderazgos a tener una Colombia justa, sustentable e incluyente. El mejor aporte que podemos hacer desde la universidad es promover una cultura de paz, con ética y en convivencia para incentivar el respeto de los derechos humanos.
En este contexto, la universidad nos permite generar nuevos saberes a través del espíritu investigativo, desarrollando proyectos coherentes y pertinentes a las necesidades de las comunidades. Ideas que motivan a los emprendedores a crear nuevas empresas que impactan en el entorno y que propician la reflexión de temas de trascendencia para la región y el mundo.
La Universidad del Cauca es un lugar para permanecer, para estar en sintonía con la naturaleza, para hacer de la tecnología una herramienta, un lugar para propiciar la vida con calidad, para conectar las dimensiones de lo humano, trabajar en torno a objetivos comunes, sentir el bienestar. Un lugar para encontrarse con el arte y la cultura. Un lugar en donde el proyecto de vida institucional se articula al proyecto de vida de la comunidad universitaria.
Considerando las exigencias en el tema ambiental, la alma mater de los caucanos le ha apostado a la construcción de una universidad verde. Por ello, ha establecido unas políticas ambientales para promover un campus sostenible, orientado a ser más responsable con su entorno y propiciando espacios de innovación, emprendimiento e investigación.
Hoy lucimos el reconocimiento de ser una universidad con acreditación institucional, ubicándola entre las mejores del país, con el compromiso categórico de seguir avanzando con calidad en temas de lo formativo, en el manejo administrativo, en el desarrollo de la investigación, en el relacionamiento con la sociedad, en los procesos de internacionalización y en las acciones de cultura y bienestar.
Por esto y mucho más, tenemos una acreditación con rostro humano.
Con rostro humano.
Con rostro humano.
Nos estamos preparando para llegar al bicentenario y asumir con liderazgo y compromiso regional y nacional los desafíos del mundo en materia de educación superior. Aportamos con el conocimiento a la construcción de una mejor sociedad, dispuesta a proponer e innovar en desarrollos científicos, tecnológicos y culturales. Promovemos desde los diferentes escenarios una cultura para la paz, la ética y la convivencia. Innovamos desde las prácticas curriculares y pedagógicas para fortalecer la presencia de la universidad en la región y el país.
Una universidad comprometida con la paz territorial.
Los mejores días de la Universidad del Cauca están por venir, porque somos calidad, somos región, somos paz y somos Universidad del Cauca.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Oigan, ¿cómo les parece que la Universidad del Cauca ya tiene inscripciones abiertas? ¡Ay, qué chévere! Sí, ya mismo les envío la información para que la vean.
Eso. ¿Y ustedes ya saben qué quieren estudiar?
No, la verdad yo no sé qué quiero estudiar.
No, pero sería genial estudiar en Unicauca.
Sí, mira, aquí dice que las inscripciones están abiertas hasta el 9 de diciembre.
¿Y cuántos programas hay?
Yo sé que la Unicauca tiene más de 50 carreras.
Además es muy buena, cuenta con acreditación de alta calidad.
Inscríbete en los programas que la Universidad del Cauca ofrece para ti.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Oigan, ¿cómo les parece que la Universidad del Cauca ya tiene inscripciones abiertas? ¡Ay, qué chévere! Sí, ya mismo les envío la información para que la vean.
Eso. ¿Y ustedes ya saben qué quieren estudiar?
No, la verdad yo no sé qué quiero estudiar.
No, pero sería genial estudiar en Unicauca.
Sí, mira, aquí dice que las inscripciones están abiertas hasta el 9 de diciembre.
¿Y cuántos programas hay?
Yo sé que la Unicauca tiene más de 50 carreras.
Además es muy buena, cuenta con acreditación de alta calidad.
Inscríbete en los programas que la Universidad del Cauca ofrece para ti.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Oigan, ¿cómo les parece que la Universidad del Cauca ya tiene inscripciones abiertas? ¡Ay, qué chévere! Sí, ya mismo les envío la información para que la vean.
Eso. ¿Y ustedes ya saben qué quieren estudiar?
No, la verdad yo no sé qué quiero estudiar.
No, pero sería genial estudiar en Unicauca.
Sí, mira, aquí dice que las inscripciones están abiertas hasta el 9 de diciembre.
¿Y cuántos programas hay?
Yo sé que la Unicauca tiene más de 50 carreras.
Además es muy buena, cuenta con acreditación de alta calidad.
Inscríbete en los programas que la Universidad del Cauca ofrece para ti.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Oigan, ¿cómo les parece que la Universidad del Cauca ya tiene inscripciones abiertas? ¡Ay, qué chévere! Sí, ya mismo les envío la información para que la vean.
Eso. ¿Y ustedes ya saben qué quieren estudiar?
No, la verdad yo no sé qué quiero estudiar.
No, pero sería genial estudiar en Unicauca.
Sí, mira, aquí dice que las inscripciones están abiertas hasta el 9 de diciembre.
¿Y cuántos programas hay?
Yo sé que la Unicauca tiene más de 50 carreras.
Además es muy buena, cuenta con acreditación de alta calidad.
Inscríbete en los programas que la Universidad del Cauca ofrece para ti.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Oigan, ¿cómo les parece que la Universidad del Cauca ya tiene inscripciones abiertas? ¡Ay, qué chévere! Sí, ya mismo les envío la información para que la vean.
Eso. ¿Y ustedes ya saben qué quieren estudiar?
No, la verdad yo no sé qué quiero estudiar.
No, pero sería genial estudiar en Unicauca.
Sí, mira, aquí dice que las inscripciones están abiertas hasta el 9 de diciembre.
¿Y cuántos programas hay?
Yo sé que la Unicauca tiene más de 50 carreras.
Además es muy buena, cuenta con acreditación de alta calidad.
Inscríbete en los programas que la Universidad del Cauca ofrece para ti.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
¿Y tú? ¿Ya te inscribiste a los programas que la Universidad del Cauca tiene para ti? Inscríbete a través de www.unicauca.edu.co hasta el 9 de diciembre del 2022.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre del año 2022 a través de www.unicauca.edu.co.
Institución sujeta a inspección y vigilancia por el Ministerio de Educación Nacional.
Queremos que seas parte de la familia Unicaucana. Inscríbete hasta el 9 de diciembre.
Por favor, ingresemos nuevamente retomando el taller ahora que vamos a tener con nuestro conferencista. Si quieres, puedes usar este canal. Sí. Y yo me pongo este para acá para que no nos... Oh. Profesora Marisela. Marisela.
All right. Okay. Dime. ¿Qué era? Ah, ¿sí? Buen madre. Ni siquiera yo sé esa. Sí. Muy interesante ese caso. En una invasión. Wow, tremendo caso. Okay, so how many survived the break? Listo, listo. Okay, let's get back to this. All right, so let's do a recap because it was a long break. Maybe we forgot some of these ideas. Right, so we're talking about multimodal pedagogies, right? I introduced concepts such as multimodality. I introduced concepts such as design, mode, the idea of semiotic resources, and culture, and interculturality, right? Now, I want to show you nothing because the computer is not showing anything. All right, it's getting back. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and then we'll try to do some practical, and I will also share some material with you, all right? Okay, so you know what? Why don't we do something, because this part is more practical, and I feel like you're getting away. You're looking for the door. So why don't you guys move forward? Move forward, please. Everybody come here. It's cold, and you know, have you ever been to the army? No. ¿Quiénes fueron al ejército? Ok, en el ejército existe el concepto de formación de invierno, ¿cierto? Cuando está haciendo mucho frío, formación de invierno. Cuando hacía mucho frío, hacíamos formación de invierno. Era sentarnos muy cerquita para que nos empezara a crecer el calor entre nosotros. So please move forward, move forward. Vamos a trabajar y es mejor si están por acá. Come on. Don't be shy. Remember, from being a teacher to being a student, there's only one step. Okay, I wasn't so persuasive, as I can see. All right, good. Okay, now, some of these activities, and again, I say, look, my locus of enunciation is of a professor at a university, okay? Remember, that's where I'm standing, and this I do in my classes, but I don't teach in schools. So your situations are very different, all right? So, I was telling you that this is like my context. I've used multimodal pedagogies in classes of English, especially third, fourth semester, and I also teach in undergrad content courses. For example, this semester I'm teaching applied linguistics, and I also teach at the master's level and at the PhD program. And in all of those cases, I always use multimodal pedagogies, right? Because again, remember what I said, learning is appropriation, right? And learning is an act that linguistic, is aesthetic, is embodied, and all of these things. I apply that at all levels. So, in here, I'm going to show you some examples. In most cases, I use, you know what, it slipped my mind. Okay, so I'm going to give you some recommendations, and along with the recommendations, I'll show you some examples, okay? So, first, when you talk about, I was going to say that in most cases I draw on task-based approach and project-based approach, okay? So, and one of the first things that you need to do, because in most of these cases you need your students to design texts, multimodal texts. And so I always have them do recognition of that communication is not only linguistic. We have to make awareness, you know, we're teaching here a lot of the language and vocabulary, but there's other things you have to start making students aware, nonverbal elements, the cultural element. And so I always start by doing that, you know, making students aware that linguistic mode is important, but there are other modes. Then here, and maybe we can take a couple of minutes to do this, which is, I got handouts for you, okay? So we can just pass them around easily, one by one. You please pass around these ones, and you guys pass around this one. Yes, pass them around, please. Good. Now, I would like to give you, teacher, do you have this? Okay, can I have one copy? All right, you see, we're discriminating here. All right, so I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes for you to please analyze the design of this text. All right? Analyze the semiotic design of this text. What modes of communication do you identify? That's question number one. What modes of communication do you identify? Do you remember the modes I spoke about before? Yeah, spatial, visual, and in visual we have colors, right? We have linguistic. We also have oral, you know, like noises, sounds, and also we have spatial, space, right? Now, I'm gonna give you a couple of work with the person next to you, all right? And so first, kind of like identify the semiotic design of this. Is that me? So, look at the design of the page. Look at the design of the page. Talk to the person next to you, okay? Look for a person. Don't feel alone. If you're alone, look for a person, or let me introduce you to a person. Okay. Good. Right. You see, identifying the design of a text is important. We'll see in a minute. Right. So, okay, I know that many of you don't know each other, some of you don't know each other. So, and sometimes it's hard to start doing something like this. So, in cases where you're sitting with a person you don't know much, and it's always hard to start an interaction with another person, especially when you are asked to do something, you know the best way for you to start the interaction is saying, yo no sé, pero vamos a mirar. So, because when you acknowledge from the very beginning humbleness, you open the doors, all right? Because you're always tense, like, I don't want to be exposed, you know, like, what do I say? Maybe it's not smart. But if you start by saying, yo no sé, pero vamos a intentar, listo. Ya se quitó el peso, me van a juzgar de que no sé, and from the very beginning you construct, all right? So, give me ideas. So what is the semiotic design of this? Just give me ideas. Remember that this is a workshop, okay? Now we are interacting. Go ahead. Shall I pass the mic? Yeah, okay, here.
Really, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but just by looking the chart, that's what I think you mean. It tries to describe by categories according to the discipline and mode, describing the linguistic mode, visual mode, gestural, spatial, and audio. I don't know. That's what I think. My group didn't work.
Very good. Excellent. Yes?
Well, I think that like the first impact that I got is like the differences. There are differences. I mean that we should differentiate them, and well, it's filled in different categories.
Thank you. How many modes do you see here? Modes of communication. Which ones? We have linguistic, and the part of linguistic is written, okay? What else? Visual. Why visual? Okay, visual because we see a table, right? There is a table, and always remember this. Language is always visual. Do you get that? Language is visual. Language is linguistic, but it's always visual. Porque las letras tienen formas, right? Entonces uno siempre las está mirando por su forma, pero además por el contenido. Por eso existe typography, la ciencia de la tipografía. So, we have visual, we have linguistic written, and we have spatial, right? We have space, right? There is decisions of space, to make the meanings. They say, okay, let's give it some structure. So if you analyze it, let's look at the structure. We have here, look. So when I say analyze the semiotic design, kind of like the reading you do is, okay, you say, okay, good. Oh, look, this is a supplement, right? So it means this is number one, there's more, right? That's the first thing you think, right? And you say, okay, good. This is the title, and okay, it's black, is bolded, and so that tells me what this is gonna be about. This is some sort of description, and then we have a table. And then you say, okay, this table has like 1, 2, 3, 4 rows and some columns, right? And then at the end you say, oh, and I can access this on this website. That's kind of like the semiotic reading that you do, right? And then you say, cool, right? That is important to do. It's like when, ¿se acuerdan cuando le dan a uno el capítulo al profesor en la universidad y uno cogía el capítulo? So that first impression is important, okay? And so this table, because of the distribution, say, okay, cool, I could read this, right? So the reading says, okay, we have composition terms, and then we have linguistic mode, visual mode, gestural, spatial, and audio. And so in terms of composition, we have, in the linguistic mode, word choice, delivery, sentence and paragraph organization. What about the visual? What things do you analyze? Color, style, what is this? Size, perspective. So why am I introducing this? Because you're saying, okay, me dices que analice cosas multimodales, pero no tengo la lengua, no tengo el vocabulario para analizarlo. All right? But then if I tell you, analyze an image, and so you say, what do I analyze in an image? And say, okay, analyze this: color, style, size, perspective. Right? The perspective is who took the picture. Is it taking the whole thing or part of it? Right? So, and then gestural. So you say, okay, how do I analyze gesture? Oh, look at this. Facial expressions, hand gestures, body language, interaction between people. You say, well, analyze space. You say, okay, arrangement, organization of objects, proximity between people and objects. You see? So, and then audio, music, sounds, silence, emphasis, etc. So, what I'm giving you is, if you're thinking in terms of multimodality, you say, okay, what vocabulary do I use to talk about that? This is the vocabulary. What are some basic terms? Things you see in language. Here, colors. Didn't like the word color? All right. So it says colors. Here, primary, secondary, tertiary, and so all of this is the language that you would use. Alignment, layout, in spatial. Some basic art terms here. In basic video films, dialogue, narration, and so on. Camera angle, if you're analyzing visual videos, lighting, settling, focus, and so on. So, I know we cannot go over all of these concepts, but in case you say, maybe you want to use some of these things in your classes, and then you say, okay, I have this little table, and I can use it to more or less ask my students. Let's look at this picture. What do you analyze? Let's look at color. Let's look at size, and so on. Right? So this is just helpful material for you. Questions about this? Is it complicated? You say, no, it's okay. It's easy to understand. Right, so let's move on. So that was the first one, right? Tell students, wait a minute. You tell students here, language is multimodal, right? But then students say, how so multimodal? And they say, well, there are these modes. And they say, yeah, but what? And so you say, look, when you analyze, again, good. When you look at all of these elements, you can analyze these things, the colors, the style of the writing, all of these things. And most importantly, tell them, all of these elements create meanings. All of these elements. You can take a poster, an advertisement, and then you tell them, look at the elements of the design. And then they would see a beautiful woman, very little written language, and nice colors. And then you say, okay, why do you think this poster is making good meanings? It's convincing you to buy the perfume. And then they start, okay, first of all, we have an image of a woman in the middle, spatial, right? It's making it prominent. And then we have very attractive colors. What do those colors imply? Oh, red, passion, and so on. And so they start analyzing those things. And you need this vocabulary. Now, the other is familiarize students with textual genres. So if you tell them, oh, do a mind map, maybe you want to tell them what are the elements of a mind map. Don't always assume that they know, right? Maybe you say, okay, so what are the components of a mind map? And then you say, okay, it depends, It could be from top down, like a flow chart, or it could be circles going around. Right? How do you join them? And then you say, we use arrows, right? But maybe those arrows can determine hierarchies. Have you seen that some arrows are straight lines, but some others are dotted lines? So those features make different meanings. Yes? So every time you want them to do a text, multimodal, you try to familiarize them with those. You say, okay, we're going to write a magazine article. So bring a magazine article, every one of you, and next class we analyze the structure of it. So you familiarize them with the genre of it, right? Does it make sense? Yes? Okay. This one, allow students to explore their creativity. So this is the one that I said at the beginning. Remember that I said that I asked my students to introduce themselves? And so this is how they introduce themselves. Look at this one. This is one student, and then she says, introduce yourself to your classmates. And what she did was that she created a puzzle, right? And all of the answers here, I don't have the text, but all of this was to introduce herself, like what she liked, what her name was, and all of that. That was very creative. This is another one which is really nice. A student wrote a copla to introduce herself. I'm gonna read a little bit of it so you get it. It says, ¿Quién soy yo? Por una equivocación del doctor, mis papás creyeron que nacería siendo un señor. Destinado a ser llamada Leonardo, llegué a este mundo y cambié el rumbo de ese dardo. Nombrada Camila, blanca, crespa y mona, crecí en un hogar sin llevar puesta una corona. Mamá sin papá a su lado, tuvo que guerrear el doble en su trabajo. Con 2 niñas bajo su brazo, nos forjó en valores y nos alejó del fracaso. And so on. So, just imagine all you learn from the student just by doing this, right? From the very beginning, you can picture who your students are. You see? And this is important because, look, when I do these activities, I understand many things. Some students tell me, I am gay. Some others say, I'm an activist. I love animals. And then from the very beginning, you know the people you have in front. So you're not going to come up with a weird comment during your class that's going to annoy or undermine that student. Because sometimes, you know, se nos chispotea, hacemos un comentario por ahí raro y hay un estudiante por ahí, ¿cierto? Que no conocemos, inmediatamente se resiente. So when you know them, and this activity helped me a lot because I had so many students, and then when I was planning my classes, I always think, oh, I have a gamer in this class, I have this person in this class. And so it's kind of like I was touching too, you know, all of the personalities and identities they had in order to, you know, remember, resource their personal semiotic resources. Okay, this is one which I loved. I had this one. I didn't know this guy was a gamer, right? And so he created a game to introduce himself. So, and you're saying, hey, but isn't this a class of English? Yes, it's a class of English. But in this case, I gave him the option, introduce yourselves as you wish, all right? Who you are, right? And some of them say, I define myself, you know, departing from my language, okay? So here is another one. This is in the class of pedagogy, and we work a lot during the first part of the class defining the concept of pedagogy. We read Freire, we read all of these pedagogues, you know? And then at the end I tell them, so I want you to construct a text in which you tell me what pedagogy is, after we have read Freire and all of these people. And so they construct different texts. Some do regular PowerPoint, some do stories, and some others. But I say, whatever text you do, you have to write like at least 1 page explaining it, you know, because I also want to tackle the linguistic dimension. So this is one of those. This student constructed this 3D object of what pedagogy was for her. And this is, you look like very interesting. Look at this is the world on the floor. Then she has here, she's building, students are helping, and she has a black student, so kind of like she's being intercultural, you know. And she has here a message that says, let's see, I can't read, I don't remember, I don't know, but she has here like a teacher who is like pouring knowledge on the faces of students. So she's at the same time criticizing, yeah, putting on the wall the idea of traditional pedagogy. So, and then she explained many other things about this idea of pedagogy. So those are some, but I had so many beautiful projects that they developed. And at the end, you know, these things, we had this. And you're saying, like, where is the language used? And I was like, okay, first of all, the class is not about language itself, but I always emphasize because these classes are also ways for them to improve their language. So they construct this, but then they are in groups in a presentation around, walking, and they are presenting their product. And then they submit the written document. So I'm working on the construction, but I'm also drawing on the speaking mode, right, and the written mode. So I'm doing all of those, and obviously this. So also think of what modes of communication and transmodal sequences would benefit your instructional goals. Communicative, linguistic, content-based, and plan accordingly. Remember that in multimodal pedagogies we said we plan according to modes. So imagine you say, okay, como siempre pensamos en términos de skills, ustedes dicen, bueno, yo quiero trabajar el listening. Dice, ¿cuál es el mode que corresponde al listening? Uno dice, eso es como sound linguistic, porque uno escucha pues texto escrito, texto hablado, ¿cierto? Dice, ok, va a ser listening, ¿cierto? Pero como va a ser una secuencia transmodal, necesito que ese listening se combine con algo, ¿cierto? Pero quiero que el centro sea listening. Entonces, cuando planean, piensen a which mode do I want to favor. Dicen, no, va a ser escritura. So you say, I'm going to plan a transmodal sequence in which I give more priority to writing. I'll show you more examples in a minute. But for now, think of that, all right? You think of what is it that I want to focus on and what would be the transmodal sequence to plan. Multimodal tasks do not always require technology. You don't have to use technology, right? You can bring posters. I have materials in my office, and I have scissors, glue, markers, colors, pencils. I buy posters, and I go to a classroom. Y estamos en una clase de contenido, que usualmente las clases de contenido son aburridas, ¿cierto? PowerPoint y presente. And then I say, okay guys, tomen su póster y les pongo una tarea sobre cómo representarían. ¿Qué día hicimos la historia de la lingüística aplicada? Y les dije, van a hacer un timeline de lo que leyeron, mostrando la historia de la lingüística aplicada de acuerdo con lo que leyeron. Tomen colores, lápices y de todo. Y todos en el piso sentados por toda parte haciendo dibujos, rayando y todo eso. Después en la esquina se pararon cada uno y todos rotaron para escuchar las presentaciones. That's multimodality, right? And what did I do? I have them, you know, I wanted the reading because they weren't written, but I wanted to check how much they had read and how they could conceptualize that. And then I said, okay, put it on a piece of paper as a drawing, visual, and then tell me about it, spoken. So at the end I knew from the image and from the spoken how much they were able to contextualize. But more than that is that they were presenting more than once, because as they were rotating, they presented to one group, and then another group came, and then they had to repeat the presentation. And every time they were repeating, they were improving. Not only the understanding, but also even the language, yes? Because it was genuine. It was genuine, you know? It wasn't like practicing a dialogue. They were always reading the mind map in a different way, and people asking questions. So that generated a different dynamics. So you don't have to do that, you know? I mean, you need materials, but you don't have to do all multimodality. People associate multimodality with digital technologies. Videos, people say multimodality, videos. You can do in the class dancing, right? You can do in the class music. You can do poetry. There's many things you can do. All right, so now if you plan multi-immoral tasks, make sure to provide. We'll see this in examples later. Detailed instructions, right? If you want your students to design any multimodal project or task, or you provide detailed instructions, objectives, step-by-step guidelines, how, when, where. If you're using digital resources, you have to try the digital applications yourselves. Don't assign, applications you don't know, because they are going to come back to you telling you, I couldn't do this, and then you're gonna be put on the spot, because you need to be able to troubleshoot. Yeah, so try the applications if you're using before sending that as an assignment. So be available to provide support. Help build a community and participate in it. I'll show you that. Use or design rubrics to assess multimodal tasks. This is the other thing. How to assess this? That's a problem in multimodal pedagogies, because you're saying, okay, I failed in a language class because I didn't know how to do, I don't know, like an image or something like that, like a project. But this is a language class, right? And this is because they have the idea that communication is only linguistic. So they only have to be tested on the linguistic part. So what I have is this. I'm going to share this with you. This one. And this one. All right, so we have two pieces of materials. Okay, that one is. You go with this one. So I think it's going to take longer for them to pattern the pattern and they do it themselves. Okay. So, oh, I didn't leave a copy for me. Okay. So for the page 402, this one on screen, don't read, if you analyze again the semiotic design, because this is taken from an article, obviously this doesn't make any sense to you, right? Okay, you're getting that one. In a moment it will get to you. You will only focus on the table. That's useful to us because the rest wouldn't make any much sense. So, here are possible evaluations questions. Yes, it's arriving. Yeah, it's like the way this takes forever. Can I get some? Just, all right. You guys have this? No. All right, it's faster if you pass them around. Okay, so have a minute to read the table. Sure. That one. Yeah, go ahead. Pick him up. Oh, yes, please. Okay. You get this material, right? Good. So, all right. So imagine that you want your students to do a multimodal project, okay? Something they wanna show, but you're always concerned with the language part, you know, because you're teaching language, and so if you tell the picture or the collage is not very good, and then you cannot fail the student because of the drawing, okay? Because they're gonna say like, but it is a language class, why are you failing me because of a drawing? You test my language. And here you see that one component is the linguistic component, right? So it says, was the linguistic content comprehensible without major grammatical errors? Was the linguistic content structured in a logical and organized manner? How did the linguistic design represented in the multimodal text enable or limit the author's communication and meaning? That's in the linguistic part. Now, but this is just a guide, because if you're teaching a class where, for example, you tell the student, okay guys, we're learning about the routine, right? I want you to create a comic strip presenting the routine of your mom, right? So, and they develop a comic strip presenting the routine of their mom. And obviously comic strips have bubbles, you know, with the language. And so, and then you share in groups, you know. If you want to have them on spot, they can do that, like in front. But they can be in groups, you know, and they share, you know. They read it, and they have their classmates, and then maybe they can ask questions to each other and so on. And then you want to use this, right? You can modify this at your heart's content. You can say, because you're checking on the telling about the routines, being able to use auxiliaries, do that, and so on. You can modify this. You know, was able to use the verbs proper of you know, possibly the verbs you taught him. You know, was able to use the auxiliaries and so on. And then in the visual design, it says, did the author adopt a visual theme, right? And so you say, yeah, but how can I test this if I haven't taught this with students? I haven't taught them this. This is the question with rubrics. One of the problems of rubrics is that people create their rubrics and implement them on students. But people don't create the rubrics with students, right? Many times if you tell your students, okay guys, we're going to develop a comic strip about your routine or your mom's routine. What do you think we have to pay attention to evaluate of that? And then they say, profe, pues la gramática. Okay, grammar, right? ¿Qué más? Profe, pues que los dibujos sean bonitos. Okay, drawings well developed. Profe, que haya colores. Ta, ta, ta. So you can create. And if they don't have ideas, you share with them. You say, okay, look, this is a rubric, and here there are some recommendations. Which ones do we want to use? When you create rubrics with students, they feel it's fair because they themselves said how they were going to be graded, right? So these are examples, but then you can say, okay, how about gestural design? You say gestural design applies in a comic strip? It will, yes. It will, because I'll show you another example of an exercise that I did, and it works. Auditory design, in this case, it doesn't apply, right? Because it's a visual text. And then you have spatial design, yes? You can also analyze the spatial design, all right? And so when you do, and then you say, shall I grade all of this? Maybe you don't do all of that. Maybe you don't grade it. Because initially you want to help them understand that communication is multimodal. So they realize at the end, like, oh, all of these elements help me make the meaning that I wanted, right? And maybe you negotiate. Okay, guys, I will give you 1 point for the design, and I will give you the rest about your performance in the language. Yes? So you can work it out, yes? And move little by little into the understanding that the communication, the meanings they are making, do not only limit to the linguistic dimension, right? But you know, we always limit it because Colombian evaluation is very verbocentric. They are always thinking that the linguistic part. We have to negotiate those policies. Okay, so this could be helpful for you, all right? You check it out. And then the other document we had, the other document you received, this is another example. Do I have an extra copy? Yes. This is another example, all right? This is another example of assessing rhetorical uses of multimodality. This is more from the perspective of impact. So look at that. What modes are chosen to give a particular effect? For example, I usually do this with my students. I tell them, okay guys, you did a reading for today, right? Yes, teacher, okay. I want you to go online and pick a picture that represents the meanings that you got from the reading. And then go online and they look for a picture. And sometimes we post it on a blog and I say, or on Padlet, and I say, okay, write a short couple of sentences explaining why this image represents what you got from the reading, right? And so they can give an argument, you know, oh, you know, like I chose this image because the image for the reading for me meant this. Yes, because remember, readings, you remember the concept of appropriation, right? So that's why we cannot intend to have students have the same reading of the material you give them, because they are appropriating the reading on the basis of their previous knowledge, experiences, and even the conditions of the reading. If the student was doing the reading stressed out emotionally because he had problems at home, his reading is going to be very different from the one who was, you know, relaxed, trying to read this with a dictionary and so on. There's so many factors. So a picture will give us a picture of the way they engaged with the material, right? And so you can have this, what modes are chosen to give a particular effect, what is the effect, what modes are especially useful in creating a particular effect, what colors give an effect, what details have been chosen to create an effect, what message is the text telling its audience, how do you know, what rhetorical devices are used to evoke a statement. This is more complex, but rhetorical means what devices, like was the person using logics? Was the person using emotions? Was the person using character? Like including, when you include when you see a famous person in a picture advertising a product, they are drawing on character, you know, because this person is successful is because he or she is wearing this perfume, right? It's not logical, but it's more of character, you know. He's successful because of this. So you may be successful if you use the same product. Also the multimodal organization, the layout, the dominant mode, what information is in the background, salience. What is privileged? How do you know? What mode is obscured? What is darker? What is lighter? Where are the major elements positioned? You can also look at the multimodal coherence. This I work a lot on this with my students. Have you seen? Hopefully my slideshow is not bad, but when the students do PowerPoints, I always tell them, look, multimodality, guys. What PowerPoint are you deciding? Why did you put that picture? That's distracting. That picture is not even decoration, it's distracting. You know, the letter, the font, the location of elements on the PowerPoint. Yes, so even to design a PowerPoint, you can ask them to think of those elements, you know, how the PowerPoint elements are making an argument or not. So this is another piece of material that I hope could be useful to you. Okay, where is my... Okay, this is another one. I didn't bring it, but there's different, right? There's different rubrics, but what I say, you don't have to take it, just adapt it. Yes, adapt rubrics, construct rubrics with students. Now I'm going to show you okay, here. All right, so this is what you see on screen is a class of third semester. This is a class of third semester, and this is me playing the crazy guy, but I'm not a crazy guy. We did many things during the semester. One of those things was going to a museum, right? We were working on adjectives. And so I took him to a museum, and we were also talking about types of art and so on. And so I took him to a museum, and I created like a handout for them to record some information, choosing one piece of art. And, you know, choose a piece of art and describe it, you know, and I gave them like size, color, light, all of this language that I was giving you before. And so they were writing all of that. They took pictures, and then I say, prepare a 5-minute presentation with 3 or 4 slides, showing the origin of the author, the work, and describing the structure of the author, of the art. And so obviously they had to use the language, you know, adjectives and all of those things. So, and that's part of, you know, experiencing language. And so I'm going to show you here a couple of things we did. So, okay, I'm going to make it bigger because not even me can see it. You remember that I was talking about modes, right? And so in this case, I am planning this mode, which is the oral part, but from the listening perspective, all right? So I designed this task, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes for you to read it, or, yeah, let's have one person read it so we change voices.
I'm blind. Objective, guys. The main objective of this activity is to have fun by sharing one of the songs you like the most and digging deeper in the meaning it intends to generate through its lyrics and visual representation. Hi everyone. For this first listening assignment, this is what I'd like you to do. Number 1. Choose one song in English from one of your favorite artists. Thank you. Number 2, make sure it has a video clip published online. Number 3, focus first on the lyrics. Make sure you check out vocabulary or cultural references that help you understand the lyrics or the visual elements of the video. 4, watch the video clip and think of the ways the video and the lyrics connect. It is relation direct or more metaphorical. Number 5, with the previous information and analysis, make a post in the comment section below, including the following: your name on the top of the post, part 1, a link to the lyrics and video clip of the song, followed by an explanation of what you think the song is about. Part 2, an explanation of how the song matches the lyrics of the song, how it may help expand the meaning of the song or make it more appealing. Part 3, a list of at least 5 words or expressing with their explanations. This could be words or expressions that you learned or understood better while doing this assignment. Part 4, after making your post, you will have to respond to one of your classmates' posts. Write a response to what they wrote, listen to their song, and react to their analysis, at least 100 words. Number 5, what cultural aspect can you identify from the song that you consider differs from how we think or do something in Colombian culture? Due date, you must post this assignment before Friday, February 17 by midnight. Then you will have until Saturday, February 19th by midnight to post a reaction to your classmates' post. Remember that after this hour, the blog will lock and you won't be able to make any more posts. Note, posts of songs made after Friday midnight will not be graded. That's it?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, so you guys are teachers, experienced teachers. This is the task. What elements in the design of this task can you see? We have grading criteria and then we have the comments. If you analyze this task in terms of design, what do you see? Yes. But I'm asking you to analyze more in terms of you as a teacher analyzing the structure of the assignment. What do you see first? Yeah, we see?
The objective.
The objective, right? The objective. I want them to know what this is for, you know? Good. What is next? Yeah, clear instructions, okay? Clear instructions. What is the tone of the post? What is the tone of this assignment? It's a friendly tone, you know, guys, I want you to share. I'm not telling you like, let's learn the simple present. No, I want you to share what song you liked, you know? So that's cool. And it's friendly, but it's also, like clear and I don't want to say strict, but like this is serious, this is serious. And so I have the steps, and then I have, what else do I have? What else?
No, the deadlines.
Yeah, the deadline.
Look at that, the deadline, right? It's clear when they have to submit, so they have time and they know when it is for, right? Deadline. And then we have finally the grading criteria, right? The grading criteria. So you don't have like, teacher, pero es que usted no dijo cuándo. You do have. Teacher, pero es que usted no dijo cómo lo iba a calificar. Is there, right? So we have an instruction which is clear. We have objectives because we want students to feel that they are informed what this is about, and we have clarity about the objectives. Now, you're receiving 2 pages from a publication of mine where I mentioned the principles of multimodal pedagogy that I explained before, right? If you remember those principles. So if I'm saying that this is an application of multimodal pedagogies, what elements of multimodal pedagogies do you think that I am applying? What principle am I applying? You don't have to apply them all in one activity. You can use a couple, right? So what principles do you think? I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes, discuss with the person next to you. In this particular example, what principles do you see applied of multimodal pedagogies? Marisela, ¿vamos hasta las 12 o más pasado? Listo. Do we have some answers? Those are modes, right? But what principles of multimodal pedagogy are we applying here? All right. So who wants to tell me one that you see? Okay, here we have one.
Me again. Why me again? I don't know. That's what I think. I don't know. There's something that you said before, something related to our personal semiotic perspective. And according to the task, the first one is related to the students' previous, like background. So in order to, how they can transmit their ideas, their feelings about a specific, in this case, their favorite song. I don't know if in that part you're going to evaluate, I don't know, that part is not over there. Like the linguistic part, I mean, the grammar aspect, it is not mentioned in that part. But I think that if it refers to maybe to a simple present tense, I don't know, maybe. And then you're going to analyze how they share with the other students' post. Because it's like it functions like a Padlet. That's what I think, and I don't know what else to say.
Good. So we have one, and what you're saying is, by allowing the students to bring their semiotic resources, the music they love, I am telling them who you are, because the music we love is like a lot who we are. I'm bringing it into the class and telling the others, it's okay if you like this kind of music, okay? So that's one of the principles of resourcing students' resources, legitimizing what they bring. What else? Another one. What do you got here?
Appropriation, maybe?
Yeah, we have the concept of learning as appropriation, and engagement. Do you think they engaged in doing this activity? Look at this. 58 comments. 58 comments. Comments like this. Okay, this is there, and then this is it. After listening to the song and watching this video, I think your appreciation is right, but not at all. It is right to relate animals with nature, but nature are also plants, oceans, and lands. So I think that your opinion is good, but could be a little more precise, because although and so on. Here, I think this video matches perfectly with the song, even with the video doesn't show, etc. I agree with Veronica. So they start a conversation. Isn't that engagement? Of course. And look at the paragraphs they are writing, right? And so if you say like, okay, but this was about listening, but I told them you have to listen to at least one classmate, but many of them listen to 2 or 3. And when they had to go to listen to the song and read the lyrics, how many times do you think they practiced listening? Right? That's why I was privileged in that mode, because the exercise demanded that they did listen to other songs. They listened to 2 or 3 songs to write the comments and also read the lyrics. So you see, this very little exercise, you don't imagine how much language exposure students had. And not only that they enjoyed it. because the comments they said like, oh, I like the song, and I even did it myself many times.
Another aspect is the adoption and adaptation of meanings, according to the part that you say, relate this to our cultural background.
Exactly. There is a question about culture, you know, the idea of culture was also included, right? What is the view of communication that you can perceive out of the exercise? Is it a structural view, like it's all about grammar? It's more like this is about communication, you know? But I focused a little bit because I asked them, extract words and expressions that you learned. I was also, you know, this is important too, but it wasn't the center, you know? Because remember, no matter how much they tell you, no matter how much people tell you that you have to learn the language sequentially, first, introduction, second, verb to be, third, simple present, fourth, past, and so on. Real life doesn't work like that. Yo siempre les digo, cuando ustedes llegan a hablar con una persona, ustedes dicen, espere, hábleme en presente porque es que yo apenas voy en el presente simple, sí, nada de futuro ni... That doesn't work like that. Right? Yeah, only regular verbs, because those irregulars, that's too difficult. So, people, life doesn't work like that. We have to get our students in contact with language, and they have to learn tolerance towards uncertainty. You don't have to understand everything. Just as you as teachers should know that students should not have to learn everything you teach them. Yes? There is always a line of uncertainty, right? So it's the same. We have to expose them until they get used to it. Even if it is advanced, it doesn't matter. They will get what they can because they have limitation, because they need more semiotic resources. Little by little, they will be constructing them. I am not expecting you to learn all of this that I've been speaking about today, multimodal pedagogies. This is just your first encounter with this. But certainly you will go with certain things, you know, today we'll go thinking about these things, you know. That's the idea with what we do, you know, grow little thing, plant little seeds, and then it sprouts, but little by little. So we here see lots of the principles, you know, the idea that language is the center is not always the center, you know. We are analyzing songs. We're looking if the song and the lyrics correspond. Many songs have lyrics and you watch the video and it's nothing related to the songs, right, to the lyrics. It's just another construction, another visual construction. That's something interesting to analyze with students. And so in here, learning is appropriation and engagement. All right, so I'm gonna do the last activity and we hit the road for lunch, okay? I wanted to show you, okay, so I am going to, if Marisela wants, I can share this blog. I have many multimodal activities here, right? And then you can check them out and see, and you can always write to me and ask me. I am the coordinator of our interest group in the ASOCOPI, Asociación Colombiana de Profesores. We have an interest group in multimodality. You can join that group, and we have discussions and share materials. Yes. So in this one, I have so many. Is that we don't have time, but I wish I could show you many. This is just one. I'll show you that this is a classic that I love. Just this one because I love it, and it's in this chapter that I gave you a piece today. So this I'm gonna narrate it to you again. Look at this. I want them to build a comic strip, right? And in this case, remember what I said, if you're going to give them someone like that, you have to familiarize them with that. And so here I give them a definition, you know, just to make sure what a comic strip is, and familiarize them with the idea of a comic strip. And so this is what happened. We read a little book, right? A little story, like a novel, very short novel, about a girl who is a detective and she's hired to find a person who has been supposedly kidnapped by indigenous in New Guinea in Australia, right, around Australia. So students read the book. Then we had like literature circles in the classroom, you know. Imagine the transmodal sequence. Initially it was written, right? Then I say, guys, let's make groups. And we did like a workshop in group. And so I just wanted to make sure that they all discussed the argument of the story, the plot, and they understood the characters and all of that. And that was spoken language, right? From written to spoken. Good, that was cool. And then I said, okay guys, we're going to take it to another level. I don't want to give you a quiz asking you what are the main characters and so on. I said, I want you to create a comic strip, right? But with a turn. The turn is that you're going to insert yourselves as a character in the story, right? And as a Colombian, as a caleño, right, in the story. You cannot change the whole plot. You're just going to be inserted yourself, right? And you're going to build a comic strip. And then you're going to reflect, and I asked them at the end about here. Here I said, how does the character distinguish, here, how does the character distinguish or resemble culturally the other characters in the story? And this is to insert the intercultural dimension. And so we went from written, spoken, and then visual, but in the visual they had to do gestures, colors, space, written, you know? And then I said, respond to 2 classmates, right? That was, again, reading and writing, because they had to watch the comic of the classmates and then write a commentary and reacting to it. You see the sequence, how rich it was? And so, and what I was working, you know, reading was my main purpose, reading, visual and reading. And so here we have many, and again, we have the instructions, we have the grading rubric, everything always clear, and I also provided here the software. I gave them 2 options of 2 websites where they can create comic strips. So, and then at the end, for example, I want to see this one. This is by one student. And then I think you can't read because it says here, it says, we are safe. All right, so wait a minute. Okay, yeah. Here. This is the characters of the story, and then suddenly the student, here is the student, right? This was my student, and yes, she was Afro, right? And so notice how she inserted herself, yes? She found a character that looks very much like her. She was black and so on, and then it says, ayuda, I mean help. You see how she indexes her identity immediately? Ayuda, right? And then all of these, when I look at all of the gestures and all of the things, is very well analyzed. That in that chapter, I analyzed this case. And then this is the comic strip, all right? And then she has here a very interesting commentary, intercultural commentary. So, okay, wish I had more time and to go over this and many others, but I can certainly share the link and you can check them out, okay? So let's do one last activity, okay? I need you to work in groups, but it's gonna be like the big groups. We're gonna have like, all right, so let's see. This is gonna be group, yeah, like big group 1. This is gonna be like group 2, and you guys are gonna be group 3. Yeah, this part is gonna be group 2. All right, so this is messy, but let's work it out. Group number 1. Only for group number 1. Here, until here, right? You guys are gonna be group number 1. Group number 2. You guys are gonna be group number 3. Passing around. Group number 2. All right. Group number 2. And you guys can follow that. Now, rule number 1. You are not allowed to use your cell phones. You're not allowed to use your cell phones to check for information that can answer what the text is about. Just whatever you have available as a resource in your mind now. So, group number 1, the assignment is exactly the same. I'm going to read the questions for you. Read the following conversation for you, for everybody. Read the following conversation and comment about what the conversation is about. Roles and discourses of speakers. Do you identify any ideologies that index cultural practices? So, check that reading, that dialogue, and say, okay, so these are the characters, this is the relationship they have, do they have power, ideologies going around? You need a person to talk to. All of you talk about it. Feel free to stand up. For the group number 3, I'm sorry about the picture. I'm gonna try to show you the real picture.
Pues privó. Pero ahora va. Pero ¿y cómo hacemos? Pobre profesor. Él se sienta aquí, tú tomas la foto. Please sit. Please sit.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Okay, guys. All right. So let's listen to the first group quickly, and then we check out the what you guys got as the meanings. Who wants to socialize from this group? One person.
Well, we discussed a little bit, but it was difficult to understand. I mean, there were some misunderstanding things, but we think it's a ghost. I mean, no? That's it, in my case. No, it's not a ghost because they say, when a fellow comes back from the dead, I find that an occasion to stand up and be counted. Only when the fellow comes back from the dead. That's what I think. I don't know the others if you think.
So also we say that it's the day and night. Maybe or Loveless is like the dead, and West is the day, because this person brings light, and he says welcome.
All right, here, anybody else in this group? Carmelina, you want to share what you see?
I don't know, maybe there are two vampires talking. I'm just kidding. Vampires talking? I mean, like, yes. And they say welcome. I don't think it's death, because they say when a fellow comes back from the dead, so I don't think it's death. But, two characters related to death. Maybe vampires, I don't know. What do you think, Ruby?
No, the same. Vampires.
This is a conversation, actually, right? Is that a kind of friendly conversation? Is that a friendly conversation? Why?
Mr. Loveless was dead.
Oh, okay. Because people thought Mr. Loveless was dead, so it wasn't friendly. Let's listen to group number 2, right? Do you guys want to say anything in group number 1?
Maybe we think that there is like a short person because they are talking like ironically about one person is not tall enough to greet and talk to other people.
Right, okay, good, thank you. Irony. He introduced the concept of irony. Okay, that was actually group number 2, right? Group number 1, group number 2, irony. Group number 3. Okay, guys, you got it all. Who wants to speak?
Maybe at the end of the conversation there is an ideology of gender, because it says, beautiful women, they encourage you 1 second, cut the legs out from under you the nest. We find some ideology of gender.
For example, in the first part says, how nice of you to join us tonight and add color to these monochromatic proceedings. We were talking about racism because John Smith is black. He's a black person. Yeah. Will Smith, yeah, was there. But we also, and we were also talking about, irony, sarcasm, and we were talking about that because West says, I found that an occasion to stand up. So, and then they talk about here it's because it's a short person. It's a short.
The other person is a short person, and they say half the people, cut the legs. There are like many.
You guys want to see the video of this? Right. So first, I wanted to tell you this. I chose I gave you 3 different texts. The first text doesn't have glosses. You know what glosses is? Parentheses with comments. In the first text is 0 comments. In the second text, they have glosses like doing this, smiling, and all of these things. Group number 2. That's why group number 2, you started to get more ideas. That's why you noticed sarcasm and things like those and irony. Group number 1 was like in the darkness, absolutely. And then you got more because you got picture and the whole thing. Let's look at this.
Begin! Mr. Webb. How nice of you to join us tonight and add color to these monochromatic proceedings.
Well, when a fella comes back from the dead, I find that an occasion to stand up, be counted.
Miss East informs me that you were expecting to see General McGrath here. Well, I knew him years ago, but I haven't seen him in a coon's age.
Well, I can see where it'd be difficult for a man of your stature to keep in touch with even half the people you know.
Well, perhaps the lovely Miss East will keep you from being a slave to your disappointment.
Well, you know beautiful women, they encourage you one minute and cut the legs out from under you the next.
Quite. Excuse me, Mr. West. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a wonderful example of, first of all, how when you have more modes of communication, obviously you understand better, right? It's not just the dialogue, right? As the dialogues we receive in textbooks. Dialogues in textbooks are plain. They don't have anything for you to kind of like see what really is happening. So, and this text has a lot of things like ideologies and so on, but elements of, for example, it says monochromatic, right? Is, indexing race. Then I find that on occasion to stand up, and there is a comment saying leaning forward and standing on his tippy toes, right? Right. Basically, it's an attack to disability because the other person has a disability. And then to be counted. And then the other person says, you were expecting me, McGrath here. I knew him years ago, but I haven't seen him in a coon's prolonging sound. If you ever check the word coon, is very offensive. Now, it's very offensive. People don't use that word anymore. But we're going back to this movie is supposed to be filmed in referring to the cowboy times, right? When slaves were just released from slavery. So this is why this fight between race, slavery, and so on. And so it's difficult for a man of your stature, right, to be in touch, looking down, and it's the way he looks down. Here we have a gloss saying, looking down at Lovelace. Half the people, he said, half the people, right? You have a man, right? And then he says, Miss Lovely, Miss East will keep you from being a slave, again prolonging to emphasize that, to your disappointment. And then he says, beautiful women, they cut the legs, right? So you see, this is a whole fight that is only carried out through nonverbal communication, gaze, intonation, pitch, volume, and so on. That's why all of these elements of communication need to be considered because they make meanings, right? This is the point that I wanted to make, and there's 3 ways to close, 3 ways you can include multimodal pedagogies. Number 1, by looking at the way you analyze the data that you get in your class. The dialogues, you can analyze them looking at this. This is an analysis, having an exercise and having students look beyond that. And though highlighting the multimodality of communication. That's one way. Another one is through the tasks that I show you. You can design tasks, right? that favor modes of communication. And the last one is if you plan a whole multimodal class. And I don't have the time here, but anyways, look at this. This is work that I'm doing with a student of mine at the master's level, and what we're doing is planning classes, like the whole sequence of a class, and with a multimodal perspective. And here you see the topic, the functional and meanings of objectives, the multimodal task, the cultural dimension, the intercultural dimension, and the principles. Because we want to say, okay, what principles are we using of the multimodal perspectives that principles that I'm proposing? So we're trying to work that. So there's 3 ways. So you don't stress out. Number 1, you can plan the whole class. Number 2, you only do elements in tasks. And number 3 is the perspective when you deal with the readings, with the analysis of the materials of the textbook, and so on. 3 ways to get a little bit of multimodal pedagogies. Guys, lunchtime. I am very grateful for you staying and listening to me and participating. Thank you. And I see you around.
Muchas gracias, doctor José Aldemar. Les agradezco a todos por haber estado en esta primera parte de la sesión de hoy. Recordarles 3 cositas. La primera, estamos de vuelta a las 12 en punto con nuestra charla virtual. Los esperamos para que vayan a almorzar y vuelvan aquí puntuales. Lo segundo es que hay que hacer un registro a la entrada. Por favor, no olviden escanear el código QR. Los que no lo han hecho, lo pueden hacer ahorita a la entrada. Y tercero, recordar que para el certificado que damos a los talleres, vamos a tomar asistencia las 2 jornadas. Muchas gracias y que tengan un buen descanso.
Universidad del Cauca, 194 años. Con liderazgo y sentido social, a través de la innovación y el emprendimiento, nos acercamos al bicentenario. Hoy somos una institución que se posiciona en la construcción de una sociedad equitativa y justa, con la formación de profesionales íntegros, éticos y solidarios. Universidad del Cauca, 194 años. Universidad del Cauca.